the Board of Selectmen workshop here Monday, January 29th, 2018 at 6:30. Okay. Follow my script, which is nicely prepared, I guess. Going right into the employee policy for the ID badge. Which is put in by me. Again, just down and dirty, I mean, obviously, the community at large, we have employees out. Some departments, such as the fire department and police department, are already mandated by the statutes, but the rest of the employees are not. So I figured, drafting up a policy so the community at large knows who's an employee of the community and who is not. Not so much for, the people in this building because they work behind a desk in a cubicle, I get it. But as far as the individuals going out, land assessors, people that are actually going out to different properties, they should have some type of identification that identifies them as a town employee, and pretty much what they're supposed to be doing. But in doing so, I don't want to discriminate against anybody. So I kind of roped everybody in as one whole, where in most businesses, no matter where you work, if it's in the service or if it's in a Fortune 500 company or working for Bose, you have to wear an ID badge. So it just seemed to make sense. I mean, I know some of these policies are kind of like, we have other bigger fish to fry, and I got that, but it starts, small. I was always taught, if the first thing you do when you get up in the morning is make your bed. If you can make your bed, then that starts the day. So as small as an ID badge, it's kind of like, it's just another aspect that this town has to coming into the 21st century as being as professional as we need to be. Any thoughts on it?
Yeah. So one of my primary concerns regarding this was when I thought about it, you figure out why you need a photo ID badge, and for reasons at a Fortune 500 company, it's for security purposes. There's a lot of private information that, because there's so many employees there that you want to know who has access to what, and it's all RFID scannable. So if you walk into the building, you swipe in and you're there, and it's security clearance. And then I boiled it back and I thought, what is Templeton's need for this? And primarily, I mean, we do deal with a lot of public records. It's important that we know who is in the office. But everybody in this office knows each other because it's such a small office. I think the primary reason for having these policies or for having the employee photo badge would be more or less externally, And anecdotally, I know somebody who, I don't want to say the town, but they were chopping a tree down in their yard, and conservation had come through, and it was 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's just these two guys in his backyard. So he goes out there. He says, "What are you doing on my property?" They say, "Oh, we're from conservation." And they say, "Do you have a badge or a license or anything that's going to identify him?" And they said, "No." I think first and foremost, that's something that nobody wants to feel uncomfortable in Templeton by having two strangers on their yard that are from the town of Templeton. I think that those employees need to have their badges and IDs on them, just as Carter should have his ID or badge on him. But to have it kind of toted in this building, I think, and Holly may have a little bit more feedback on that, but it seems a little overburdensome. However, I see the need for it. I think it's a good policy. I think that we could change this, that maybe state that you just need it on person. You need it on person, whether or not you're walking around town hall or you're out and about driving a truck. I don't know if the DPW guys have badges or, if all employees have these badges. I think that might be something that we need to explore so that if you are out and about, we can identify you as an employee of the town instead of take your word for it. That's my...
Right. And I didn't want to single groups out. Because again, by the statute, like the police and fire, like I said, they need them, they have them. But I didn't. But the highway doesn't, sewer doesn't. They don't. And I didn't want to just say, oh, let's just going to do sewer and, not this building, just everybody else. I didn't want anybody to be shunned in any way or discriminated against. I think at the level of the policy, I just want to make sure that everybody was under the same umbrella But yeah, I mean, we can probably add something that, you know, if you're in this building, as long as it's, in your wallet or on your, again, it's all about safety too, like you said.
Well,
Well,
again,
we
it's
can-
not just this building either.
No.
I mean, I agree, Cameron, I think's got a good point.
Mhm.
We're not a Fortune 500 company.
Right.
We don't need unnecessary expense. However, I do agree that anybody who interacts with the public on private property should have a photo identification hanging on them.
Mhm.
You know, lanyard.
Mhm.
I don't even agree with hooking it on the pocket or your coat. Should be a lanyard. But again, you go into the selectman's office, you got these three folks sitting at a desk.
Mhm.
Any reasonable person is gonna realize, oh, these folks are employees.
Mhm.
Same with the assessor's
That's right.
office. So, again, to just carte blanche and say everybody has to have one, every board, committee, what have you, is a waste of money, in my opinion. People who interact with the public on private property should have it.
Well, might I suggest people who interact with the public outside of the normal office setting? So Luann, I think she'd fit your definition. Certainly Laurie would, building inspector would. Van drivers, they don't necessarily go into private property, but
But they pick up people
they
at private
pick up
property.
people. I don't think our vans, all of our vans aren't even, have town of Templeton on them, do they?
No.
All but the Mart one.
Yeah. So, I mean, if that's, we could start in that fashion, if that's of interest to you, because then that would cover Conservation Commission, ZBA
Mhm.
if they're gonna do site visits, planning board if they're gonna do site visits.
Yeah.
We could try to take that. I would just wanna talk with Richard, cause I think he's got the machine.
He does.
But truthfully, I'd like to talk with the staff because the PD or the town clerk might be better locations to do that.
Right.
Because
Mhm.
they have office hours, PD's 24/7,
Mhm.
town clerk's at least, 4 days a week with one night.
Mhm.
And she's swearing people in.
And we did that last year, where Luann had hours that the machine was gonna be available for photographs and IDs. I think
Right.
there was like 2 Mondays or 3 Mondays in a row.
Yeah, I forget what they did, but
Right.
they did do some of that.
They did. And as far as cost, I mean, we own the machine, so,
Yeah, I have no clue what.
yeah, it's
what
our
it
machine.
costs.
It was bought by, I think it was a grant from the emergency management. Because again, all those folks have ID badges as well, because when they go out to the public, directing traffic or what have you,
Right.
I just didn't wanna, I just didn't wanna be,
Well, like the librarian, you go into the library, they're there at the
Right.
register. I think most people would put it together, as Doug was saying.
right. And the other thing is not so much in the office, if Joe Citizen walks in the building and always walking out, and she has a lanyard on, they're gonna realize that she's a town employee, and they could potentially ask her a question. You know what I mean? So it's not just the office setting, like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna sit at my desk, and obviously, if I'm sitting at my desk, I must work here. And you're right, it is a small community, but it's just like another etch in the safety perspective, to be another, I know the auditors had some issue with safety, with the financial stuff. Again, this would just be another added layer to that security and safety, because then the public would know, who they're talking to, when they're talking to somebody that's working for the town, for the taxpayers. That was my driven force. I didn't want to segregate, like, the drivers or the highway department, or, because I already knew, and I think Luann's already told me that, most of the staff that go out to do the assessments, I think with Laurie too, they already have their identifications and lanyards. But I wanted to make sure that it encompassed everybody to be in the same, what's good for you is good for me, which is good for everybody.
Yeah, that's primarily my concern, is that they're dealing with the public
Mhm.
out of this office. Internally, I see where you're going with, if you can identify them, and obviously might have their name on them so they can
Right.
address them with their first name and,
Right.
and so on and so forth.
I mean, I didn't want to make it mountains out of molehills. This wasn't my intention. I was thinking of something positive, that another attribute that we can get to the employees. another sense of belonging, another sense of accomplishment, that, hey, you do belong to a team. This is a team concept. We're working that team through, and this is just another aspect of that, that camaraderie that this town needs. That was my thought.
So, I mean, I think if we just change it to,
Okay,
when you're sitting at your desk, you don't have to be wearing it. but
okay.
if
I'll
you're
work on that.
interacting with the public in,
Okay, thanks, Doug. You have anything else to add? Kim?
and again, Carter should have the opportunity to talk to the staff and get their opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I just, more or less the scope, who this applies to, in terms of, I think that needs to be clearly defined. Is it just town hall employees, or is this, you know, are we talking DPW? I mean,
Yeah, we're
police
talking-
don't really need it, because they have a nice badge, but.
No, they have their own IDs too. They
Yeah.
have, which, again, same with the fire department. Both those organizations are mandated by the state statute that they need to have it.
I think it would, for what I can see for potential risk is if, say, somebody on the conservation committee went out and did exactly what I had said, you know,
Right.
they have an ID badge.
Mhm.
But even, I think it should be, you know, if you can positively identify somebody on a board, you know, and say, like, if somebody came in and, you know, we got a new assistant of the town administrator, and they said, oh, I'm on this board, and you can't recognize, well, here's my card, here's my ID, you know, I sit on this board, you know,
Mhm.
something like that. So, I mean, I know it is small, but I think that is a risk factor there, is if there's
Mhm.
turnover.
Turnover, interaction, yeah.
Turnover could draw something like that, you know, say Luann, and God bless she doesn't, say she did leave, and then all of a sudden now you have a new face behind there and nobody recognizes it, you know. So I can see the risk, give and take, you know, it's the foresight of looking down the road, what is the risk that's gonna be exposed, and so,
I understand.
I think that needs to be clearly defined, the scope, and then
Okay.
really what these badges
You
are,
get that?
the purpose of these badges.
Yes. Okay. I can get with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
That's
So,
okay.
if I may, I'm still a little unclear as to whether or not we're issuing them to all town employees, but they only have to visibly wear them when they're gonna be out in the field doing an inspection, or we're going to be issuing them to people who are out of, I'm gonna say, a normal office setting, dealing with the public.
I think, once you talk, I would like Doug, talk to the employees, get their feedback to see what their interaction is. I think we'll be on the same page as if, you know, they would go to everybody, and then, if they're at their desk, they don't need to wear it. But if they leave their desk for any reason, that they should have it on, in case someone like stops in the hall or something like. along those
Truthfully,
lines.
if you're gonna issue them, the simplest thing is in other organizations, their lanyard comes in the building with them and it goes on and it becomes second nature
Understood.
for most of them,
Okay,
as opposed to where'd I have it, where'd I lose it, it's under papers,
right, I
I
got you.
forgot to bring it today. Because you do have workers that are identified to some degree by the fact that they have a uniform on, whether it's a Templeton, a police officer
Mhm.
uniform, or they're behind the window at the dispatch, and they've got their jersey on, or they're a public works, person that's got their T-shirt or their uniform on. So what I'll do is I'll talk with the staff in general,
Okay,
and then I'll talk with Richard about the best location to issue it's his machine, it was bought with the grant
right,
from
it
him,
was.
but that may not be the best thing to do, given they're volunteers and there's no stipend involved or anything for them. Maybe having paid staff do it, whether it's town clerk
Yeah,
or
the town clerk.
police or
sounds
something,
reasonable
might
place
be a
to
little
me.
bit better, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everybody, appreciate it.
Yeah, because people have to go there to get sworn in, so that would be the perfect time.
Makes
to
sense, doesn't it?
Get their badge, yeah.
Right, and they're here filling out their paperwork when they're hired, many of them.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, going on to, thank you again so much. Going on to the Baldwin Elementary School Advisory Committee. We talked a little bit about that. A couple
We did at
meetings
the
ago.
last workshop,
Yep,
and that's one of those where sometimes, where we have a clear direction, or we've discussed it in some fashion, we'll actually write a policy and give it to you. There's others where we're just gonna kind of, at times, come in, bounce the idea around, and if we see folks, seem to think it's a good idea, then we'll put the energy into drafting the formal policy.
Right.
So, Mr. Policy Drafter.
All right, so attached is the memo, which outlines brief descriptions of the GIS maps, which are attached to the policy. I can go over that very shortly. I just wanted to discuss on the charge of composition for the committee, the
Yep.
makeup of the committee, and I wanted to receive y'all's input, feedback, and suggestions. The main part I want to discuss is
So
point
you just
number
said
2.
you all? Nice,
Okay,
keep going,
yeah.
keep going.
It's nice to have somebody else in the building that does that.
Yeah.
Next, I gotta teach him, you betcha.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Try and get through this quick.
I know.
Wicked.
Wicked, I like it.
See?
Catching right along. You must be from Kentucky.
So it'll be made up of 7 people. We're proposing initially 1 from each of the following: 1 select board member, 1 from the advisory committee, 1 from the area neighborhood, and then 1 citizen at large with preferable knowledge in real estate. And we'd like to have 3 out of the 4 of the following committees and boards: the Affordable Housing Planning Board, Community Preservation Committee, and the EDIC.
Mhm.
So do you guys like the makeup of
Yeah, that's good.
anyone we're missing, or think you guys should be in consideration as well?
I think you get everybody.
Yeah, I think that's all the key.
What's that, Doug?
I think that's all the key people.
Yeah,
Would be a good mix.
yeah,
Okay, so you guys wanna move on to the maps?
great.
So outlined on the memo, the first parcel is 385. This is where the school building is located. And I realize looking at this now in black and white, probably should have selected a different color for it, but
No, it's okay, I
that's
get it.
okay.
So 385?
So the building is just over 16,000 square feet, and the assessed value is a little bit more than 1.5 million for the total acreage, value of the building, and the location.
And that's the assessed value.
Yes, the assessed
Okay.
value. And that can be accessed online as well.
I got you. Now, is it 407, is that also owned by the town? Did you get a chance to look at that?
Yes, that is also owned by the town.
Okay,
That's a pretty big piece of property, a
It
little bit
is.
over 2.5 acres, but it's undevelopable.
right. It's because you can't get there.
Yes. Yep.
Right, because we don't own the land between 387 and 388? Or is there,
That's actually
That's-
part of
That's
407.
part of
part of
407.
407.
okay, so then why is it not reachable?
Had to do with previous ownership with railroad company, I
Okay.
believe, and it's just undevelopable piece of
Oh,
land.
yeah, that's right. Isn't there at 407 to that
There's a
other
railroad track right through
259?
there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that old bridge, that
Yeah.
concrete bridge.
Okay,
Because the railroad tracks went through 407.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, you can see 410 comes all the
Yeah,
way, yeah, okay.
that's right.
Part of the rail trail.
Yep.
Interesting.
Okay.
so parcels 384 and 383, which abut the elementary school, those are also owned by the land, I mean by the town, excuse me.
So that's 383, 382, 381?
383 and 384.
Where's 384 on this? I'm not seeing it.
It's a little sliver right next to the school. It's
Oh, between, okay,
just north of it.
okay.
It's this one right here, Cameron.
Oh, I'm looking at a different map. Ah, here we are, okay. I'm on the same page with you. Flip it a few more times.
Next time I make
Accent.
these, I'll choose different colors to pop out a little bit more. black
No,
and
I
white.
was actually just on a different sheet, and it
Oh,
didn't,
oh,
it wasn't
okay.
labeled 384, yeah.
Okay.
Now I see it.
So 384, again, that's pretty small. It's not even a quarter of an acre.
And 383, you said?
And 383,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
one is worth 22,000, and that's just over a quarter of an acre.
Okay.
You do have a house trapped on 382, accessible only by a right-of-way across the town lands.
Yep.
And there would need to be consideration to try to reorganize that, because the current location of the right-of-way is not in a good way for reuse of the properties.
Right in the middle. Driveway's right in the middle. Okay.
So overall, parcels 385, 384, and 383 are an estimated acre size-wise.
1 acre.
1 acre, yes.
And
And
what's the zoning for that side of town in Baldwinville? It's a 1 acre minimal build site, or is it at a 2? I forget.
that's a good question. I'll mark that down to follow up on that.
Yeah, because, I mean, based on the building criteria, there are some parts of the town that it's 1 acre, and then there's other parts of town, it's a minimum of 2 acres to build. And I'm not sure what Baldwinville is. That would be a very big park.
Hey, board members allowed to sit on the committee, so
Mhm.
that's one suggestion.
Yeah, there you go, Kim.
Was they just voluntold for the position?
So you actually have about 3.5 acres altogether. If the former railroad land, when you assemble those 4 parcels, you've got about 3.25 acres
Yeah,
altogether.
if you put the 407 to break that up potentially. Yeah, I got you. Because that, I mean, we should be,
Now, the physical arrangement of the land may pose some issues, but from a straight having enough square footage to possibly do something, you might be okay.
good.
And there are no deed restrictions on any of those parcels?
Well, what
382's
we
got the right
did
of way.
do, and Eric, so those are the lands that at this point would be looked at, and then the committee would have to, take another larger view. And he's laid out in paragraph 4, the time for completion, with the target being, and these buildings are very difficult to dispose of. But the hope is that it would be ready for the 2019 town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that in the charge. Okay.
So if I can, coming back to Doug's question, what I had arranged, and this was a general conversation with John Henshaw, I spoke with him specifically about the potential for CPA funds to help finance this effort. Because you really need to do some title work, make sure there are no deed restrictions, that none of the land was donated to the inhabitants, for use as a school only, forevermore.
Right, which is an issue we had with the old town hall. Because that building, that land,
Yes,
9 Main Street,
that's right.
the donors donated it to be used for school or recreation.
Right.
So then technically, when we moved the town hall in there, we're in violation
Violation.
of the deed. Fortunately, the building burnt down, so kind of, it's a moot point, but,
I think so, unfortunately.
So there's some title work we would want to do. It's not worth doing a phase 1, 21A at this point. But for some pretty cheap money, we might be able to get an environmental assessment. I don't think we spent much more than $1,100
Yep.
for the walkthrough of the police station. There may be some assessment reports. we don't necessarily need to do a real survey, but at least feeling comfortable that we've got a good graphic of the lands. I don't think there's any measured drawings of the buildings. We can check back through some archives. But having somebody at least do some line drawings, good set of photographs. And then when you have the request for proposals package together, it's good to have that look nice. That costs a couple of bucks. So, you know, I'd have to put a budget together, but I'm thinking probably in the neighborhood of 12.5 to advertise. It's helpful, I find, in doing these, to have at least one member of the committee attend the Office of the Inspector General's class on real estate acquisition and disposal. So when they're partway through, and that's classes, I don't think that one's been scheduled yet. So he thought that that was possible. Some out of the affordable housing, though we're not absolutely committing that that would be the only reuse, and some out of the recreational fund.
Okay.
He did ask that someone from the committee, CPC, be on this effort, which is when this kind of grew a little bit. So if this is of interest to you, I would next draft a memo to him this week, which would go to their committee meeting on the 8th of February, so we could get the whole committee's reaction
Is that
to the
preservation?
Yes, they're meeting on the 8th of February, and I would go there on this, and I have one other
They have interest
affordable
in this,
housing
so.
idea that I want to run by the committee as well.
I think it's a good idea. I think this is excellent job. Nice job, Eric.
Yeah, good job.
And if you guys are comfortable with it, I'd like to sit on it, and I'll attend the preservation meeting and stick with you on the process.
The challenge here really is getting, you know, is getting some good stakeholders, because having someone who's familiar with real estate, having a affordable housing advocate, having someone from the neighborhood.
I know somebody in the neighborhood that was interested in this, so we already have one. And obviously, we'll send out notifications and
Yes, we
whatever.
would.
and survey.
Advertise,
Yeah.
We would.
just like the other.
But I
Yeah.
know there is an interest on what they were doing with that, so maybe I can rope them into helping us.
So, I mean, this is the hope, you know, that we can be ahead of the curve, because once the school moves out, in order to avoid, you'll have two choices. One is to leave it empty, but check on it periodically, which means we're in the surplus properties insurance.
Right.
It's a liability in and of itself, having a vacant town property.
Or we've got to convince the insurer that we're actively using about 30% of it for storage or other activities, and then we can keep it on the regular insurance policy. Neither one of those are great
No,
options, frankly.
and like Cam said, it becomes more of a liability having a vacant building.
It is.
Okay.
So if this could head off us having it vacant, that's a good idea.
Well, I don't want to mislead you. It is not easy to dispose of these kinds of buildings, and even once you have a developer, the last one that I did like this took the developer 2 years to get the financing before they converted it to 36 units of elderly housing.
But did the developer purchase the property right away?
No.
No.
Okay.
No, they didn't. So that's always a possibility. You know, you can give points to somebody. The challenge always is, so in this instance, the town had made it not an absolute auction. They'd done a request for proposals and made it clear that the proposed reuse of the property was as important to the town as were the actual dollars. And so they had some nonprofit that wanted to give them 10,000, the affordable housing, elderly housing developer who offered 100,000, and then a private developer who offered 150. So the challenge is, even if the nonprofit had the $100,000, if you sell it to them and then it doesn't happen based upon what you thought was going to happen, getting the property back, dealing with the developer, can become a nightmare in and of itself. These are decisions you'll have a chance to make down the
road.
line, of course.
Okay.
So then, if this seems agreeable, if you can just, take one more look at it over the next week or so, we'll have it for your agenda for the 12th.
Okay.
And we will present to the CPC
On the 8th.
on the 8th. Cameron, welcome to be there.
Yep, yeah, I will.
I believe it's a 6 PM start, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
The other thing, just to bring you up to speed on this, is I mentioned to him the Day Mill properties, and there may be some others in town that I'm not aware of. But they're coming off the market, they're coming in here, and, you don't have the money to buy them. And would the CPC be interested in taking some of that affordable housing money and putting it to work? Not just this initial stages of this project. Perhaps $125,000 or $140,000 that you could have available to you to purchase those units, work out a relationship with the housing authority where they did a lottery for families in town who would then buy them. Housing authority perhaps get them mortgaged, and then the money would come back, and that would be the seed money.
I got you.
Because the prices are low right now, I don't know a great deal about the complex and the relationship between the association and everything else. It seems like that's as much an issue down there as anything else. But you can't produce two-bedroom apartments for 115, what are some of the prices we've been seeing? 125,
120.
130, 140. You can't produce two-bedroom apartments for that price.
No.
And so it seems a shame to lose that out of your supply. So we're going to talk with them about that on the 8th as well.
All right.
And so do look for the timeline for completion as well. You've been involved in a number of town projects. You know how long they take.
Right.
And if you think we're being horribly optimistic, let us know.
Not at all.
No, but the sooner you get started, the better.
Yeah.
Good job on the policy. Looks good.
Thank you.
Revision of the opt-out policy.
Okay.
Karen, you have to update us.
So this is one that Doug had mentioned the other night. I don't even remember what we were talking about, Doug, when you brought it up. It had been on our radar screen, but Doug bringing it up reignited our interest. And on the second page, we're suggesting where it speaks to eligible persons and plans. This would add a small Roman V, which says that benefit eligible employees may enroll in any substitute plan, such as one available at other employment or through a spouse or the purchase of an open market individual plan, provided, however, that such a plan is not secured through an entity to whom the town must pay an assessment, such as the Narragansett Regional School District, because if we have an employee who happens, their spouse works there, we pay them to leave us, they're just going to Narragansett, as you pointed out, and their budget goes up, and we pay 85% of that budget. So we
Right.
haven't gained anything.
Right, we're actually losing.
Massachusetts Regional Vocational Technical School, the impact isn't nearly as much, but it's still an impact. The Massachusetts Area Regional Transportation, I gotta check, is that authority or commission or
I think it's authority.
agency
I think
or?
it's the authority.
Okay,
I think that's right.
okay, so I just wanna double check that. And then just the general catch-all, rigid flexibility, Cameron, of or the like.
Or the,
I like it.
I couldn't think of everything.
Right.
Yeah, and they could add somebody.
And we could end up, joining something.
Mhm.
So that's the suggestion based, following up on Doug's comment from the other night. And I believe that other than noting that there would be an amended date, I think that's all we would need to do. Because the adoption date stays the same.
Just be an amended date.
It would just be, this amended policy, I might have to change the date of 2016 down here at the bottom to show to 2018. I should probably do that.
Right.
So I think that covers everything that was of
Yep.
concern.
are we sure this is an absolute benefit too when it comes to, so if we had one person who worked for, whatever department here, and then they went to, instead they opted out, and then they went to Narragansett, or their spouse had Narragansett coverage. We pay 85% of that. Are we sure that the insurance don't line up one-to-one? 'Cause
Yeah,
it-
we know they don't line up. You have a much more generous policy than the school does.
So would that mean that they would pay, they're generous saying that we pay more
Yes,
than Narragansett does for their insurance?
yes.
So wouldn't that be a benefit then if they opted out of our insurance and went to,
Except for we're paying them $6,000 to leave,
To
as
leave
much
the
as
program.
$6,000 to leave us.
And then we're paying more to Narragansett. for
And then
the-
we're paying more over at Narragansett.
So we'd be losing money. We're not saving.
so wouldn't that mean that they, if you're saying that we have a more generous program, we would cover more of their insurance, correct?
Our policy covers more than the Narragansett plans.
So it'd cost us more to have them in-house than it would at Narragansett is.
Yes, but if you pay them $6,000 to leave, and then they go to Narragansett, so let's say, for instance, that they have a $24,000 plan
Mhm.
here. You pay $18,000 of that,
Okay.
okay?
Yep.
The Narragansett plan, I'd have to go back and look at the pricing. Let's say it's about $22,000. I think it's a little bit less than us. And they pay roughly $17,000 of that, roughly,
Okay.
okay? And you're gonna pay 85% of that, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna pay roughly $16,000.
On top of the six.
On top of the $6,000 you paid them
To opt out.
to leave you. So it's cost you $22,000 for them.
To opt out to go to Narragansett.
So your costs to have them leave you and go to Narragansett, I'd have to pull
Mhm.
the exact numbers, are roughly $4,000 more than if they'd stayed with you.
Okay.
And again, we'd have to pull the numbers and look
So
exactly.
short term, it's more expensive. Long term, it would be less expensive.
Long-term, it's more expensive.
Mhm.
So
So
you're gonna
it,
keep paying them.
you still pay that $22,000
You
every
pay
year?
you pay
The
them
opt-out is every year.
$6,000
Oh, okay.
every
It's
year.
every
an
time
annual
they're
opt-out.
not with
Okay.
you.
Okay, I see what that
It's
is.
not a one-time deal.
I thought it was a one-time.
No.
Okay, that makes sense then.
No, you pay them, you pay them 35% of what we avoid with a maximum of $6,000.
Okay.
And that goes from year to year to year.
Okay.
Are we gonna bring this in front of the business meeting, or?
Unless there are, I do have a typo to fix, and I probably should have this amended policy approved and adopted. I should probably change the last line or two there. But I think that this does addresses what Doug's raised the other day. It certainly does what we had on our radar.
Yep.
And if it seems agreeable, we would bring it out to the business meeting of the 12th.
Yep, I'm agreeable to it.
I'm agreeing. Doug?
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
So I'll leave it this way, again, take it, reflect on it. If you see something that we didn't catch, even if it's in the original, we have time to fix it, we can fix the typos and have it for the 12th of the month.
Sounds good.
I just have a question. On the eligibility stuff, it's.
What section are you in, please?
The, A, like 3, I think, is probably.
Yep.
Where my question is gonna fall into. So, we hire somebody new.
Yep.
And from day one, they say, no, I don't want the insurance. Are they eligible for the opt-out? No. They have to receive insurance
They have to have received insurance for a period of time.
and then not take it before
That's
they're
right.
eligible.
That's right.
And would that apply to both new hires and people who have been employed?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And that was to avoid, so, you come to work for us, your wife already has the insurance, so we're just paying you for nothing, really.
Yeah.
The other thing, this actually brings up an important point that I left out when I wrote it. Thank you for reminding me, Doug. Good catch. We need to further amend this to make it clear that if we have somebody who's already working for us, I need to address what Doug just
Yeah,
brought up.
because it talks about new hires, but it doesn't talk about existing. And the wording is just, it's a little.
What, I
it's
think
just-
I think
had a hard
what
time
happened in the
understanding.
last community, and they shouldn't have done it, somebody's wife worked for the town, then they came to work for the town, and they couldn't pay the person enough money, so they said, well, we'll give you the opt-out. Well, they shouldn't have, because she was already working for the town. And by the fact that you have to have been on the policy,
Right, so 12,
yeah, let me just,
or 12 months.
I need to take a step back and just look at that.
Okay. I know what he's talking about.
Because to pay the opt-out to a new hire who's opting out because they already get insurance through their wife who's on your plan
That makes no sense.
makes no sense. So I think this is okay, but I just want to take a look at that.
Good catch, Doug.
Also known as fixing the Keppel problem.
Yeah.
Michael and Allison Keppel.
I don't even know who that is.
The people who got away with $6,000 a year when they shouldn't have.
Yep.
If he's watching, forgive me, Michael.
Any other questions on the opt-out? We'll see that back on the 12th. Excellent. Revision of the personnel policy, employee recognition program, out-of-class pay, et cetera.
I did not get a chance to write those today, and I apologize.
Are we skipping that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Move that to the next workshop, I guess. Do you think we'll have something on the 12th just to skim through?
I do, because we've actually been through it a few times. I just have to have it written
I got you.
for you.
All right, so we'll see it potentially on 12 Feb. If not, I
Yes.
can go to the next workshop.
Yep.
Board of Selectmen policies and procedures, Mr. C.Fortes, take it away.
God, where do I start? Okay, so
Start at
this,
the beginning.
this lengthy 12-page document, I want to say thank you for being here, because I think this is a very important policy for us. It's kind of a shame that Diane and Julie aren't here. So this isn't in the traditional format of the way we do the policies, as you know. I kind of did it just for clarity purposes, so we can refer to it 1001, kind of structure it, organize it. So we'll conform to the way all these policies are written,
Okay.
once this is established. There's not many changes in here. A lot of the changes, as Carter puts it, is rigid flexibility. Starting with 1001-003. So we had how to come about draft policies and procedures and how they should be put on. Carter had stated that it's probably best if we have, you can only submit a policy for voting after at least one workshop discussion has taken place unless deemed necessary or deemed to be an emergency.
Right.
I think that's great. I think that way we can kind of keep the business and the workshops separated in that nature, so we can have these discussions here. When we go to section 102, and we're looking at 002 in the vacancies, this is just a wording change to kind of comply with statute. There's
I'm sorry, which section?
102002.
Vacancies.
Yep. And so, yeah, this is, I think our bylaw states this one. So that's what that's conforming to. 3, we're adding other, the town auditors, and there's a typo there, SCA, needs to be such,
What is that?
on 102003.3. So that whole issue there is, we're just saying who we can appoint. 6 previously was it was worded so that there was we act as the police commissioners, the parks and cemeteries commissioners, and instead we'll do the rigid flexibility where to act on all powers and duties as prescribed by statute and bylaw. So,
Which makes sense.
yeah, just kind of pulling it back. Going to section, so this is 102005, right? So it kind of goes on to the next page. So this is something that I wanted to defer to you guys. So when we get elected, or we're holding our first meeting after elections, we have to reorganize. We vote for a chairman. We hold all these.
Right.
So here's the question is what should we be doing at this first meeting? And Carter had said, you probably want to adopt a schedule. You guys probably want to have, obviously who's chairman, who's vice chairman, and you probably want to review the Board of Selectmen policies at this meeting. So I figured I would defer this to you guys and kind of see, what the taste is, the thermometer, and if there's anything else that we're missing out of there that we could probably add in. Or if that sounds good, with just reviewing the calendar, reviewing the policy,
Well,
and then.
restructure,
Yep.
review the calendar, review the policies and procedures. And
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what the first meeting should be,
it is,
selecting the officers,
that's right.
talking about roles and responsibilities.
Okay, so with those 3 things, is there nothing else that really needs to?
At that first meeting after the election, I mean, unless there's something crucial that's burning on the back burner that needs to come forward, but I mean, again, we can,
Okay.
I don't think that's gonna be
In general, you've just been through your town meeting, and it's sort of like,
exactly.
oh, thank God that's over.
Yeah, right,
And it would let you have a schedule through June 30th, your meeting schedule.
right.
And Doug said, let's revisit it, so this would give each board the opportunity to have a discussion amongst themselves as to Tuesday nights may have been best for this board, Wednesday nights may be best for the next board. So each board can adopt their schedule for a fiscal year at a time.
Okay.
Okay, so
I
you
think
guys
that's-
in agreement with that?
Yep.
Okay, so
Doug, you agreeing to that?
I'll add that to 102005 for the organization.
Okay.
So that's good. Next section is 103001. So this is responsibility. We don't do number 5, so we just cross that one out. 8 is a wording change on there. So this was something that I wanted to defer, and I was hoping Julie would be here. 103003 for the responsibilities of the clerk. So this was something that I think the meeting minutes should be deferred to the clerk, not to write them down. Previously, if administrative secretary or the assistant of the town administrator, whoever was taking notes for us formally, was not here. The clerk will take the minutes. We struck that because it's recorded. However, I think it should be a responsibility of the clerk to review the meeting minutes prior to the meeting and kind of go through and make sure there's no,
Typos.
Type it,
Typical
yeah.
errors,
just so it kind of takes it out of our plate. We can hit it at a high level and say, okay, yes, I remember this taking place, yes. But kind of giving it to the clerk to say, this is what the meeting minutes were.
Mhm.
And they should be signed.
Yes.
Right.
So I think that might be something.
Are we doing that now? Holly, are those minutes being signed?
It's another project on my list.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, no, I know you get a big list going.
I think that's something, yeah, if it would make our meetings a little bit faster, you just have somebody already ready, done, put it on their shoulders, and now they actually have something to do.
Yeah, and again, we shouldn't, lose sleep over if it's a meeting or two, because, Holly does have a full plate.
Right.
And now if the clerk, after Holly gets them prepared, the clerk has to review them, that's gonna take,
Mm-hmm.
some time.
Yep.
And then if clerk does find errors or omissions, Holly's then gotta go back to fix it.
Right.
So, if it's, 3 meetings before we approve, a minute, we shouldn't really, lose sleep over that.
I will
We
just,
don't wanna go months.
well, just to play
ahead.
devil's advocate, I will encourage you to try to not let that happen, because otherwise it's, unfortunately, and I understand why it happens and how it happens, it becomes way too easy to let it slip. And there is now a statutory deadline of when these meeting minutes have to be adopted by the boards.
Okay.
It is a
It's
month.
30 days.
I mean, it is there, but we've just been through digging out, which,
Right.
because, well, we can put that off. So kind of in the middle there somewhere. Yes, some time, but not too much time.
So do we want to change this maybe so that,
Within 30 days.
well, we could add that, instead of getting really wordy with it though, so the signature piece, where I don't know, maybe this is overbearing, but if we change the meeting minutes to be signed by the clerk after they're approved by the Board of Selectmen, add that addition. And
Well,
that-
if Holly gets her minutes done, and let's say that takes 5 days. It's
Yep.
given everything else that's on
Mm-hmm.
her plate, that's very conceivable.
Mhm.
That can take a full business week to get
Mhm.
that done. So if they go to the clerk, like at the end of the day, Thursday, let me just use that as an example. That's 3 business days, depending upon vacations and such. If the clerk returns them by Monday and we make whatever changes, and if the board's agreeable with that, then, we can have them printed in that signature folder, so that when they are approved, we have the clerk there that night, and they're able to sign them.
Yep.
That's-
If it all goes
To plan.
perfect.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
We're getting there.
this doesn't have to be, so, I mean, even if the meeting minutes are submitted on a Thursday, right? I mean, the clerk can review them and say, good, and then advise us at Monday's meeting. Or they can say, here's some revisions, Holly, and then it will defer, but,
Right.
so a one-off chance perhaps. And Holly's pretty good with not typos and all that other stuff, so. I think, so add maybe that clause in there about a signature, so that,
Right.
okay, is to sign off, and I'll work that with Carter, signatures for those meeting minutes.
And it is pretty rare that we, find
It is pretty
changes in
rare.
there. It is pretty rare.
It just takes that responsibility kind of out of the rest of us, although we will review it, it's still, we're not looking at it for typos and stuff where somebody else can review. So that was pretty much that, and the responsibilities of the chairman and the vice chairman are still the same. No edits, changes there. So 103.005, if you can just earmark this page, because I will come back to it. There's another section there that Carter and I kicked around to see if it would work here or where it is currently. So it's
Okay.
103.005, 106.003. So just earmark that if you can, and we'll flip back to it.
Yep.
Structurally, though, there's no change. It's just formatting and flow. So 104, meetings and hearings. So this is a section here on page 6 where we're going to formalize the regular board meetings and the workshop meetings. So we can say that, the conduct informal working sessions is necessary. This is Carter had suggested doing this, and I agree with it, to break those out. However, going even further with this, there is and this was something we didn't know if we wanted a hard code or not, which would be the annual retreat and the all boards meeting.
Mhm.
And we could do them as a standard operating procedure and actually code them in here, or if we want to keep that loose. We could even add that to, I think, under the chairman's roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. But I like to harden those up a little bit to make sure that we have, the retreat needs to be identified as an annual occurrence, especially with our goal planning sessions and, again, building with our team concept.
Okay.
I think that would be crucial, I think.
So we'll,
I agree, I think both.
okay.
We have to too, look at how are we gonna get, I wasn't at the all boards meeting, so I don't know what the attendance like, haven't.
It was
got to
good.
watch
Very
it
good,
yet.
yeah.
So was it better than the prior year, or?
Yeah, it was about the same,
I would say it was about the same, but I would say that,
The interaction was much better.
the interaction was much better. Part of that may have been,
The lapel pins.
that was what drove it home. Brought it across the finish line.
That's good.
I was gonna say, I think that the mood, to me, was different, very different, because the audits were done.
Yeah.
It wasn't the, woe was us, one of the state receivers coming in to take us over.
Right.
What happened to the checkbook? The audits were done, the accounts are in good shape, we continue to make progress on some of those outstanding items. We still have things, but people were really able to kind of focus in on the challenges that their corner of the organization was facing.
Right.
I really thought it was pretty positive.
So as representation though from the boards and committees, was there the majority of them there, or?
I'm sure you
only
could,
a
There was a
handful?
few missing because of the weather. We had a snowstorm that night, so there was a few that were missing. But, we captured the majority, I believe.
yeah, there were some new faces. There's a lot of regulars that you would probably picture to be there, and there were some new faces
Yeah.
there that was good. So there was some good turnout all around.
It's definitely something that should be, again, I think on an annual basis, just, to bring the team together.
Mhm.
We all have, a certain aspect of the job to do, but I think at the end of the day, and then we all have our separate jobs to do. But at the end of the day, we're all doing, the king's business for the town's people. So if it's working in the health department, or working as a board of selectmen member, or working for the school committee, or, working for the sewer department, or the, advisory committee, we all have a role to play, and that one commonality of keeping the community at large together and moving us in the direction of forward, and I think that's why it's important.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree, I think it's a good
Yeah,
meeting also.
yeah, you did miss a good meeting, though.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm gonna watch it on YouTube, I haven't.
Good for you.
So I will code in the annual retreat and the all boards meeting.
Okay.
Just for clarification, then I'm thinking in the back of my head, annual retreat, do we want to keep this loose, or do we want to have a particular target time? And the same thing with the all boards meeting. Do we want to have a particular range of time, or just say that it needs to be held once a year?
I think at the specific time of the year that we typically hold the,
If you like the budget evolutionary process,
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
think about this, the board has its retreat in September.
Yep.
We're doing revenues November. It's kind of, holiday time. It's annual report time. It's state of the town time.
Mhm.
That feeds into, its budget guidance has gone out. It's kind of a good time for the all boards meeting to
Right.
look back and look
So
forward.
if we picked like, I don't know, I don't know when we held the annual retreat, was that in August?
September.
September. So if we did 1 month of like September 15th, where, now you can do it in August 15th, or you can do it in October 15th, giving you that almost 2-month.
I would
Range?
just say, annually on the month of September, whatever the day's gonna be is, we can leave that kinda loose.
Okay.
Because that day might change, but at least the month is there,
So if we want to do it September and,
and,
January?
January.
Yeah.
okay. And then,
And then leave the date kinda, the day itself
Yep.
kinda loose, because again, that could fluctuate based on,
of course.
our schedules.
So then, yeah, so annual retreat and the all boards meeting. I'll consult with you
Mhm.
offline as to your vision of what we should be doing with both of those meetings and
Sure.
Carter. So that way we can get the wording precise on what
Okay,
that needs to be.
sounds good.
If that's all right with you, Doug?
Yeah.
Okay. So then emergency meetings, that's just, if we don't have a regular scheduled one, something comes up. Nothing, no other changes other than Carter nitpicking on the attend instead of attendance. 105, this is something that,
Oh, the agenda, yeah.
yeah, this is something that I wanted to bring before you, because we currently have our own agenda now and the way it's structured. But I was kind of kicking this to you guys, because I think the way we currently run our business meetings and the way we run our informal sessions are two distinctly different things. This, where we're kind of just roundtable discussion, very good. However, the business meetings, I think, need to have a strict regimen of the way it's controlled, it's operated, and the way it flows, so that it's, a real quick business meeting, the way it should be. We all did our homework, we all had time to, think about it, it's time to vote, So, when we look at currently, and it's kind of hard to see this right now, but currently in our meetings, we usually do the call to order, the Pledge of Allegiance, the minutes of the prior meeting. Then we have citizens' input instead of the open forum, which is something that I had kind of written in stone down at the bottom, which is individuals wishing to speak shall do so for not more than 3 minutes, for no more than 20 minutes in total, is intended that board members will not debate with the members of the general public, nor attempt to answer any questions without the time needed for proper research. Questions will be answered after pro-erp research, I don't even know what that word is, at the following meeting. And then chairman shall ensure that personnel matters or personalities are not discussed, so on and so forth. So that's kind of what that is. It's where it gives them an option to speak at the beginning of the meeting if there's a big topic or issue at a business meeting that may have controversy in the town. We will still have that workshop discussion, which will allow for some of that input in an informal way where we can talk. And then it will also defer it to that open forum so we can hear from citizens if it is a bigger issue that we need to hear that input from. However, it kind of curbs what we have now, where it's been an open dialogue during these business meetings, which go off track and off topic, and sometimes we get questions that aren't even on the agenda about something in particular, and it's inefficient at this point. Where a lot of times we can just say, well, offline, since it's not a meeting, let's talk offline, and then we'll get it on the meeting for next time. So
Right.
that's the intent of this, is to just make our business meetings much more formal. Not to close out conversation and not to be less transparent, but just to make those business meetings operate as they should, as a lot of other towns and communities do.
But I can see by limiting the public, though, to just speak at the beginning, at the beginning of the meeting, they may not think of a question related to something that's, 5 articles or 5 agenda items down. And then as we start the discussion, oh, what about this now? So, Mr. Public now doesn't really have that opportunity. I think we should allow for that open dialogue, but the chairman needs to be, cognizant of, once it starts to drift off of the topic, cut it off.
That's what this does, so that you don't, if you have a strong or a weak chairman, not saying you are either, John, but if you have either or, it allows for that discussion to be already contained. However, when we look at, so when I first came on, there was a lot of, the back and forth between the board and, whoever was in the crowd on one-off items. They wouldn't come to the stand behind you so you could talk into the microphone. You can't hear them. If you watch the YouTube videos and stuff, you can't hear them because they're in the crowd somewhere. The amount of time wasted on those, and I'm sure you recall some of those discussions.
Yeah,
It
some
was
of
just
them, yeah, absolutely, I
time
agree.
suck over nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
That needs to be curbed. Now, I think the way this does it is, once again, lack of a strong, or with a strong, it codifies it. I agree to your point where we need to hear from the citizens. We need to hear, and as we go through. However, on these business meetings here, we have like the public hearings, we have our policies that we're voting on, we have stuff that needs to be approved. But it's not the first time it's coming to us. You can't vote on something the first time, so there will have been time at a different point to have discussed this. So the business meeting should really just be regimented at that time. That's what I'm saying. It's not, because there will be other opportunities at workshops or at a previous, board meeting where you will have heard this. So that's kind of where this is going. So it kind of structures it, formats it, and allows us to, if we want, after the meeting, have questions or something like that before we take a formal vote, but this is like the drop dead, you know?
Mhm. But again, when we're taking a vote, after the motion's made and the second's made,
Mm-hmm.
we have to offer discussion
Mm-hmm.
before the vote's taken. So-
That's just us, that's not to the floor,
Mhm.
so. And that's, right now, it's up to the chairman whether or not he wants to recognize.
Mhm.
But once you put this in, it's still up to the chairman essentially.
Mhm.
However, it makes it much more regimented, I guess would be the word that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think regimentation is good, but I don't want us to stifle the public either.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe that this will stifle the public. I think it will curb the current discussions that are had in here. However, I think it will take an adjustment period to get those opinions and voices to where they should be, to make it more efficient and regimented. So yes, there will be I would say a period of time where because Templeton's been doing the same thing for God knows how many years at this point. It will take some adjustment. But I think when you get this adjusted correctly, it allows for us to have this open dialogue before we vote on the issue, so that we can come back and report to whoever has these questions, informed, not forced under the gun to make these answers, because if for example, Mr. Public asks a question, and we don't have the answer to it, and we say, well, I don't know,
Mhm.
and then we take a vote on it, it seems like we're uninformed on that aspect.
Correct.
However, these questions are very one-off a lot of times. Well, because there's so many brilliant minds asking these questions, it's, well, what if this, what if this? There's always a way to poke a hole in anything.
Sure.
So it allows, if these questions do come up, these what-if questions, it gives you time to research them, come back to them. It allows you to change and form your own opinion, because a lot of times, in the sense of like Supreme Court justices, when they hold their Supreme Court hearings, they already know how they're gonna vote prior to even coming into the hearing, because they've done their research, they've listened to the public, they've had their outreach. And at that point, it's very tough to change someone's opinion. So this, if you put it back into perspective of the way it should work, when you're still forming our opinions, should all these questions be coming in from the public and the input and all this, so that it formulates down the line in 2 weeks when we hold another one?
I think
But
that's
we have
what's-
typically, though, in workshops, not allowed the public to speak.
Mhm.
So even though we're discussing something in a workshop, traditionally, now whether we're changing that, but traditionally, the public couldn't ask a question about
Mhm.
the topic that we're discussing.
Mhm.
So now they don't have that opportunity to ask it prior to the meeting where we're gonna vote it.
That's entirely up to the chairman if he wants to recognize anybody in an informal workshop,
Mhm.
so.
And I have. There's been times I have, and I've also, when we had specific people in the room, such as like Mr. Mayo or something along those lines, where we're actually discussing something about his department,
Sure.
we would get some input from Mr. Mayo. And as far as the people in the public, as far as them asking questions, and obviously the public has every right, and I encourage them to come here on our meetings. I encourage them to be here, to listen to what the government is presenting to, and for the future of the Templeton community. If they have a question, or if they have an issue or a problem or a concern, bring it up. There's some time constraints, but again, we're trying to structure this in a way where I'm not gonna give you the answer. What I will say is, I'll look into it, we'll put it on the next agenda item, which gives us, again, all the time that we need to do our research and acknowledgement, so when it goes on to say, the next agenda item, and that person can come back, then hopefully at that point, we can give that individual the answer that they were looking for. Cause Cam's right, I mean, it's really hard to shotgun, why is the water running down, Cottage
I mean,
Lane? I'm
once
like,
you
I
go
don't
off
know.
topic,
Right. Right,
all bets are off.
Exactly.
Sorry, you're done.
I would like to defer to, when we look at how the structure of Templeton is, right? So any of these big major budget appropriations, anything that's gonna be huge dollars, anything like that needs to go to town meeting. So what are we elected to do? And that's to handle the day-to-day operations of this community. We are trusted with that ability, and that's kind of why we come here and do these business meetings. We're entrusted to make the right decisions. And if you don't think we're making those right decisions, 3 years, you can remove us. And that's kind of how that works, right? It's just like the way the Senate, Congress, and the President works. When you go down to Massachusetts and you go to Gardner Auditorium before they vote on something, you can put in your input at these. You can sit there and they won't debate you. It's a panel of guys. You can ask questions if you like. They may respond or they may not, to inform them. However, if you have a serious issue with something that's gonna be happening, what do? You call up your senator or your representative and you inform them at that point. So you can sit in on those meetings, you can attend those, but when they actually go to do their business, they don't entertain any discussion from anybody, it's them. And that's because we empower our senators and representatives to make the decisions based off of who they are and why they got elected, because they represent a majority of their constituents. Sometimes when you have opposition, right, which is if you're a Democrat, your opposition would be a Republican. It's very easy for a Republican to trash on anything that Democrat has to say. However, if they are in office, that means that their constituents are majority Democratic, or the Democrat Party. So you have that issue where, well, okay, yes, I understand your point, but I'm representing my voters. So I think with the Board of Selectmen, yes, it should be very open, and I am open to anybody coming up in the public. But those the debates, the discussions during the Board of Selectmen make it much more inefficient, and it's essentially ineffective at that point. It just creates chaos and animosity on these discussions. So that's my whole input and feeling onto it.
And
Yeah,
I
feel
agree, I
about
mean,
that.
structure is good, and we need structure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Doug.
So with that, with the open forum,
Yep.
citizens input, then we have the new business, the old business, board and staff member, the executive session, and then the reconvene for action. So, the way it was previously was call to order, pledge of allegiance, then the open forum. And there was announcements and proclamations, so if we had anything before the open forum, we could say that
Right.
then and there. And then it went from new business, town administrator updates, and then review and sign warrants, new business, old business meetings, and then adjournment. So the structure was a little bit different. It had the warrants in there. Carter had stated that, in a more formal setting where it's, 3 Board of Selectmen, no town administrator, that might be something where we are reviewing them. However, Carter reviews the warrants, and we all can review them individually as we do currently. The only reason why I put that in there was so that the warrants got signed on a weekly basis, which, since it's done on a Wednesday, we'd have to set up a meeting for Wednesday, so it doesn't make sense to have that in there.
Understood.
And I think the way we do it now is fine.
As long as you come in and sign.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if you guys are agreeable to the way that is, the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Just like we discussed, so
Yep.
that's good.
And then with the citizen input at the bottom, I will leave that as be, and we'll accept the revisions of Carter. I also do, go ahead, Doug.
I still think we need a section in the agenda, not necessarily for discussion, but lists any item that was on a prior agenda that we didn't take action on or dismiss.
That's on the old business.
Yeah. So, but again, we need those items, I think, listed. Single line, doesn't need to pay a whole bunch of description.
Yep.
Because what happens is, we discuss something and say, yeah, we're gonna, table that for a future meeting. And then everybody forgets about it and it never gets discussed again, has happened. So if we have just, this was discussed on, this date deferred, subject.
So if it was,
Then-
if I might, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. So again, it's not like we have thousands of these items and it's gonna take 3 pages for the agenda. We might have, 3 or 4.
So if it was like an Excel spreadsheet of, I don't know, we could figure this out, but, item, target date, status, or something like that. When it's done, it just comes off.
Right, exactly. So just like
But he
here
wants it on the-
tonight.
He wants it on the agenda, though.
Yeah,
Right, I mean, we can
because-
put it in the package, and then if anybody has any questions about it, they can just,
Right, because like item 5 here, we skipped that tonight.
We did.
So if we had the next agenda, this item 5 should say,
It would be an old
discuss,
business.
Item from January 29th, deferred for future discussion, and then the subject revision of personnel policy. And then it would be there until we discuss it again.
Tracking.
Yeah, just so that we don't, but again, I don't know that it should be a separate page, because everybody needs to be aware of what we're deferring and when we get back to it. So just, a single line entry in one section says, these are the 5 things that we deferred from prior meetings, so that we see, we've got to get back to these things.
The one issue that I have with that is, so if we, what do we typically use old business for now, is to bring up previous discussion, but do we ever have the time where it's like, new business, we deferred something, tabled it, and it comes back next week for us to sign? Like for the police station, if we had tabled that to the next week, that wouldn't be under new business, that would now be under old business.
Correct.
So that, I think that would give them a misleading opinion if we listed all this stuff of what we're gonna take action on. So if we have under this old business now, something like that, it would be there, people can read the meeting and say, or the meeting, agenda and say, they're taking a vote on this. Rather than kinda, cause it would allow for a loophole, almost of a slip, like, not saying we would, but there would be the potential to have a fast one pulled by saying, oh, we just slipped this right in there, it's the same stuff every week, but they just slipped this one right in there and it went unread.
Right,
So I
yeah,
think if you make it pop and stand with what is actually gonna be taken, that's the only thing that, as devil's advocate, that I can
right,
see.
and again, I wouldn't necessarily put it under old business, I would have a section
Okay.
of, deferred actions. And,
On the agenda.
and then when we're going to bring something back, we make that statement, oh, move that back for the next agenda or something, I don't know. I mean, I just think it's too easy, not only for us, but for the public to lose sight of
Mhm.
what do we say we're gonna do and now we're not doing.
I think maybe internally, if Holly would be to this, if we tabled something or whatever, if you had an Excel sheet open up behind your Word document when you're taking meetings, your minutes, just to say, all right, we tabled this, and just add a column to your Excel sheet, on the date. And that way we could have a tracking sheet, so if you wanted to see what it was on a monthly basis, you can say, Holly, do you have a list of the old business? So that way we can keep, internally, it's not on there, it's not cluttering the agenda, and we can, something like a tracking.
I mean, we could
I wanna
certainly start
understand-
with that.
The difference between old business, which is, you have 3 items, and it's on the agenda, and somebody says, I'd really feel more comfortable if we had the full board here before I voted on this. Or, okay, chief, we hear you, but I want to ponder this one. That would normally be old business. Project tracking, which I think is item tracking, project tracking, I think is what Doug's asking about. Yeah, okay, we'll put our heads together and
Yeah, I
come up
think,
with something.
I think that may be the,
Isn't that what we're already kind of doing with that, refer from workshop, refer to workshop?
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
maybe just add a little more than that? Would that work?
Yeah, we can come
Doug's
up
more
with something.
talking about, like, when we said, I'd like to table this till a future date, which is like the website, right? Where it just hasn't come up, but it's still tabled and out in table land.
Right.
Yeah, I can see where that is, we lose tracking
Like a
mechanism.
procurement policy.
I wonder if that's more operational than meeting and policy structure, and I think, I can see the pain point. I just don't know how to remedy it on this agenda.
Because when people look at the agenda, that's the items that the population sees that we're gonna be having to work with. So if they have, if you, not old business, say you put it in a separate paragraph of things that we're, the Board of Selectmen are working on, they're gonna have the misconception that these are things that we're gonna be talking about.
Yeah.
Which in
Right,
fact, these are
that's-
things that we're not talking about.
That's what I
Good
wanna
point.
avoid.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that stuff, and that's what the people are gonna think, that, well, it's on the agenda,
Yeah.
so you're gonna be
That's a good
talking
point.
about it. I'm like, no, it's only on there for a tracking purpose, and why is it there then?
Yeah.
It should be in a tracking document, it should be on an agenda document.
So are we doing this for the public, or for the board, or for both?
Both.
I think-
In my
I'm
opinion, it should be
personally
both.
for internally.
So, if we did an internal document which became part of the package,
Yes,
that is available to the public online.
it is.
For tracking, and if it came out with the board's business agenda package, you could ask us if something didn't seem right. Under board and staff member comments, reports, you could just say,
Absolutely,
you could grab that piece and have it there, but you wouldn't be putting it on the agenda.
understood.
Does that
That makes sense.
seem like it might work to meet your objectives?
Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's a good point. You're right, if it's on the agenda, people may expect us to discuss it,
That's
and we
right,
may or may not.
that's right.
Right,
So
so
then you're
I
gonna get,
think that's probably.
So let's try
I
that.
like what you
We'll,
said.
we'll try that for the next business meeting.
Yeah.
So for instance,
You can just call it tracking.
Yeah, it's item tracking is what it is.
All it is.
It's like if I had,
You just put it right behind the agenda in the packet.
it's like when I worked for the consulting firm and I had leads, you know, I mean, here's my leads, what do I need to do next? When's the next callback on this client, type of thing. So, yeah, okay.
It's a good idea.
So let's try to sort that out between now and the
Everything else
next
looks good on that.
Okay.
I had no
business
concerns.
session.
All right, so on the back side there, 105,002, this was just a posting of the meeting minutes. We will cause, this was something that Carter had to explain to me, so we'll cause a instead of post a notice, is that we're issuing kind of the directive to say post it,
Mhm.
rather than us actually going out there and posting it. So that's what that change is. The bulletin board closest to the town clerk's office is not posted there anyways, so we're gonna take that out. The minutes, and that's, again, formality of will cause the minutes to be taken. And then just kind of operationally how we do the meeting minutes. 106, 106,001. So this whole section here, just committees, boards, and commissions. So this isn't essentially us, this is how these boards and committees will act and operate under the selectmen. So number 2, there was, shall be registered voters of the town. We incorporated taxpayers, business owners, or persons of recognized expertise with an interest and affinity for the betterment of the community to be allowed to serve on these boards.
Mhm.
So you don't just have to be a resident of Templeton. So that was the only change there. Let's see, and then 106,000, yep.
Can we legally require someone to be a registered voter?
To serve on a committee? Well, we would be the gatekeeper
Well,
of the committee.
since you are the ones who are determining what the qualifying factors are, yes, you could. The reason, and this is something that I tossed back and forth with Cameron, is you could have somebody who perhaps owns a property in town, they have substantial interest. You could have somebody who owns a business, but perhaps they don't live in the community. So the idea was to, especially given the challenge in always finding good people to serve on these committees, the idea was to try to make sure there was still some sort of solid connection to the community,
Yep.
but that you broadened your base a little bit.
Yeah, and I do like, that we would allow a business owner,
Mhm.
even though they may not live in town, if
That's
they have a
right.
business in town.
They have stake here.
I think that's.
Yep.
That's very fair. I was just curious about requiring them to be a registered voter, since the law doesn't require you to be a registered voter.
Yeah, this is all the stuff that we are gatekeepers for, obviously not like sewer commission or the advisory committee.
Yeah.
But digressing from that, so everything else in there is standard. 106,002, we changed to ad hoc instead of advisory, so that we can differentiate between the two. So that's pretty much just wording changes on that. 106,003. So this is the one here that I asked you to earmark. So 106,003 and 106,005. This is, it's 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. So essentially the way this is working is this is the ethics and how to interact with the community, and the relationships with everybody. Whereas if we go back to 103,005, how we operate as a board. So it's our internal board ethics. However, we can take 106,003 and insert that underneath there if we so chose to do. Carter, you were the one with primary concern. Do you have anything else to add as to why we should or should not?
Just, I mean, you can leave it alone, but also the other section said in its relationship to staff, to this,
Yep.
where's, was the best place for it to be aligned, that was all.
The reason why this was there at 106,003 was because this is strictly just for the committees, the boards, and the commissions, so that if, you look through our policies and you wanted to find committee stuff, you can just go to the section and we'll have everything outlined. That was primarily the reasoning for that.
No, I got you. I can go either way, it doesn't really matter.
So the thing we're pondering is combining 106,003 and 103,005.
Not necessarily combining it, but inserting it back into that section at
Oh, so keeping it as a separate section,
Yep,
but putting it in
Yep.
Under ethics.
103.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Like I said, I can go either way, it doesn't matter.
that's what me and Carter said, it really doesn't matter, but for flow, someone might prefer it one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't know, I'd have to read them again.
Alright, moving on to, 106,004, which is crossed out. That's just a change that we had previously where, we're no longer requiring you to be a resident of the town, to serve on some of these boards and committees. And then 107, all the way down, is just state statute on remote participation that I feel like should be in there in case anybody had questions, because we do accept remote participation here, we've adopted it, so, I figured that should be in there. I do wanna say, something in here that we should maybe, and this is a huge maybe, include something about Robert's Rules of Orders for how the meetings work and how they're structured, how we should operate under meetings, which is, the chairman needs to recognize you, this, that, the other thing. If you want to discuss something from the public, you need to approach the mic so that we can record your voice, things like that.
Identify yourself.
Yeah, things like that, so if the board so chose that I could incorporate something down on how we, Robert's Rule of Order for, I forget what the other thing is, it's like my town, no, not my town government.
Town meeting times.
Yeah, base it off that and just take the boilerplate from that and just insert it, so now, this is how we operate, this is how we're, do something like that.
Yeah, so we would have a section kind of like
I would,
conduct or
Yeah.
something like that.
I would probably insert that right underneath, right under 104, meetings and hearings. I would insert that right under there, probably after 005 and before 006.
Yep.
And just insert some boilerplate knowledge right there. So that if somebody was so inclined to see how our meetings operate, they could just pull this out and say, okay, this is how we do it.
Right, because I agree, people should be recognized and they should have to come to.
Yes.
And that should only be for business. Obviously, here, we can talk and
Yeah.
do whatever, as long as we're courteous,
Right.
But in those
You
regular
know,
meetings.
keeping the aisleway open so the people in the back can easily get up here.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and I didn't really even think about it. I forget what meeting I was watching, but somebody was speaking, they weren't talking to that mic, and I didn't realize that, yeah, you can't pick up anybody if they're in the crowd talking unless that mic's really sensitive.
We do have mics over the, right, they're really not that,
Yeah.
it's really kinda hard to capture that.
All right,
That
that's
sounds
all I
good.
have, so if you guys are, I gotta do another proofing of it, to get the finalized proofing, make sure there's no spelling, read it for like the 25th time. And then with those changes made, and then I'll get a formalized copy of how it reads, and then with those changes, so I'm gonna accept all these changes here. Any final proofings that I made, I'll have that ready for the business meeting, and that way we can see what exactly was changed and what it reads fully, so.
We
Yeah.
can
I
get
mean,
a
I'd
full-
like to read it before, getting it,
It'll be there on Thursday in your packet.
yeah, the day before is too,
No,
it's too lengthy to
I think-
try and read and digest all and.
It's in the policy, if it's not in by Thursday, then it can't be on, so.
That's right,
Yeah.
Thursday by 12.
Yeah,
So-
well, I think for, yeah, it's
And
Wednesday.
Wednesday by 12.
Wednesday by
Excuse me.
12. You don't have
Wednesday
it
by
by
12.
Wednesday by 12.
Thursday at 12 really doesn't give us time. I'll get a memo from somebody and I'll be like, what's the answer to this question, this question, and this question?
Mhm.
Or all these, all of a sudden, a lawyer calls for something. Thursday at 12 just doesn't give us enough time to get
Understood.
it done.
So now Holly doesn't have to play, should we or should we not? She just says, oh, that's not the policy, John, sorry.
That's right.
So one concern I do have is up in the first section.
Yep.
Where it's describing, there's one
When you
little
say
bitty
first section,
sentence.
1001,
No, like, I'm thinking more like 102,003.
Yep.
So there's one little bitty sentence that says we're delegating this to the town administrator. So, but as you read the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like, as you're reading it, except for that one little bitty sentence,
Yep.
that the Board of Selectmen are overseeing all the operations. We're the ones directing the departments and yada, 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 which is not the case because we have a town administrator.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it needs to be more clearly stated that the Board of Selectmen are delegating these responsibilities to the town administrator.
Well, ultimately, it's based on his job description, but ultimately, we take full responsibility for their actions.
Correct, but again, reading the words,
Yep.
it says the Board of Selectmen, I forget, I'd have to find it again, are directing,
Yeah, it says, so the
Town department.
responsibility for supervising the departments of the general government that are not supervised by other elected officials. This responsibility is delegated to the town administrator, and the board will refrain from the involvement in day-to-day operations. So this is just saying, you know, ties length away, arm's length away, let Carter do his business, so
But I
that we're
think
not
there should
interjecting
be-
ourselves. And we monitor
but
Carter's
it shouldn't be
day-to-day.
buried inside of a little bit, a paragraph. It needs to be prominent that
More,
this is the way it operates.
more front and center.
Yes,
you're saying?
absolutely. I mean, when you bury it inside of a paragraph, especially in these little bitty fonts that we like using, it's just too easy to skim it over.
I don't know if buried's the word I would choose for that. I think
I'm still kind of,
he's referring to this section here, so if you're looking at this whole paragraph.
Yeah. Right, because you're reading this here, and now 5 minutes later, you're reading this stuff over here, and it's like, well, what do we have a town administrator for if the selectmen are doing all this stuff?
No, so
You know, I mean,
that statement,
speed readers might not
to
have that
sign
issue,
warrants for the
but I
payment
do.
of all town, like 2, 3, 4, 5, the only thing that line is for number 1. So number 1, that in total, is saying that, that we have the powers due to the select board, right? That whatever the state statute grants us is right there. And then moving forward, have the powers and duties to make rescind appointments to town boards, offices, committees authorized or required by the general bylaws, so on and so forth. So it's another boilerplate statute. They are responsible for supervising the departments of the general governments that are not supervised by other town officials. So that is saying that that's our job, right? But then the next line is this responsibility is delegated to the town administrator. So it's saying that even though in statute that's what we have, we're giving up that power to the town administrator. However, we're not giving up the signed warrants or the payments of all town bills. To appoint a professional town administrator or town council, we're not deferring that to a town administrator.
Right.
So that whole section there is just citing the statute of what we have and then pulling it back and saying, we're foregoing that right in state statute in this policy to a town administrator who's much better at doing it because he's here every day. So,
right.
I don't know if I know what you're saying about buried, but I think there's no way to peel that out without citing what it is that we're going for in there. Because you need to have, this is a state statute and this is what we're giving up, but everything else is still within state statute of what we do.
I would suggest you could strike the reference to representative town meetings since you don't have one, or at least make it town meeting.
Right, and then number
Something
4,
like
to
that.
prepare to their town meeting warrants. We don't prepare them, the TA prepares them and we approve them.
2 days, authorized, oh, yep, by the town representative, town meeting.
To adopt the town meeting warrants or something like that, is that what you're saying, Doug?
Yep,
Because you're right, it's the staff
prepare
that
them,
prepares
yeah.
the drafts for your review.
right.
So to,
To adopt, act upon, anything that connotes, you are
the authorizing board, or the
the
author?
board that is, finalizing and, yeah, adopt, I think,
Yeah, I like
To adopt the town meeting warrant, okay.
You know, like number 7, that should be the responsibility of the town administrator.
The reason for that is because if we have to investigate Carter, or if we have to investigate whatever, we usually defer that to town council. That's currently what the process is now, because we don't have the legal, however, we are still that authorizing board to make investigations, if need be.
But again, we shouldn't initiate an investigation except for town administrator and town council without the direction of the town administrator.
How do we know he's one arm's length away? That's
his job.
no, what I'm saying is we don't know how deep he is involved. So if, say, there was a procurement issue where there's kickbacks coming in, right? And there's kickbacks happening at a department head level and he knows about it. It would be our investigation based off Carter's advice. It would still be ultimately our authority to do an investigation. It's our scope.
If I may, I see Doug's point a little bit, though. To make investigations of the affairs of the town and the conduct of any town department, officer, agency, or employee of the town. So if you don't something that's going on with a particular board, stop one should be the town administrator. Were you aware of this? Did you look into this? Look into it, find out, and come back. And if the response is, something's not looking right, then the investigation, look-see, would be into the town administrator. You don't want to have a situation where step one is, Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint a subcommittee of 2 people to go investigate over here without having followed through the process.
Yep.
Particularly if you were to have some I'm fortunate in that I don't have what I would consider to be, single issue, agenda-driven board members. But you could end up where somebody crossed swords with, I don't know, the Concom or something else, and they decide to use this venue as a tool to go do that.
Right.
And kind of blow past the town administrator, which then undercuts
It undermines
when
your
he
authority.
has to go do something. So I'm not sure of the wording, but I do understand what he's saying.
So I think we need to make a change there.
Yeah, I hate to decline that or defer that to the responsibility of the TA. I think, for me on number 7, it's primarily, yes, we would initiate, Carter, if you had suspected somebody of doing something fraudulent, we would need to be notified. You can't just go off and do this investigation. I mean, you could, essentially, but we would have to be notified at some point that you're investigating somebody for fraud or whatever it may be.
Right.
Now,
And I or any TA, I would think would, whether it was an email, whether it was in executive session, whatever appropriate, here's what's happened, I'll keep you posted.
mhm.
Because I wouldn't necessarily know anything right away.
However, if we found something, like rumor has it that Joe over there, whatever, is doing something fraudulent, we would still make the directive to say we need to investigate. Now, I think this would formalize it, to Doug's point, we'd have to formalize an investigation to do that as a select board, right? We would all have to say we need to investigate this rather than a one-off.
Would that be an executive session?
It would need to be, otherwise
It-
we're taking personnel matters.
Yeah.
And it's the TA's responsibility to deal with personnel matters, not ours. And again, if the town administrator isn't keeping us informed or anything, we shouldn't have hired him and shouldn't keep him or her.
Right. Who manages the personnel policy?
We do our best.
I understand, but I mean, who's the direct oversight of the personnel policy?
At the end of the day, pieces of it get parceled out, but it's the town administrator who ends up being your chief financial officer and your HR officer,
You know, chief procurement officer.
and your chief procurement officer.
I'm
It's
just
a nice
double
job,
checking the
isn't it?
bylaw here.
It's a great job you got.
Well, let me just say that I think that what the community doesn't see and what you all don't see on a regular basis is we had an issue come up last week. That is a legacy issue we haven't been able to crack yet, and I don't want to name the department.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
I
tread
think
lightly.
you're all aware of what it might have been. That took 5 hours.
What?
It took 5 hours.
Okay.
And so, if the more of those things, the tailings issue, some of the accounts that don't reconcile, there are still a number of those out there. And I think that as we can get some of those things off of the plate, then we can devolve some of these, as we planned, to accounting, payroll, so that we can continue to
What
make
if we
progress. But
curb
there
that
still are a
discussion
number of issues
and
out
said,
there.
instead of to make, to cause, to make cause for. So if we wanted to make an investigation, that's what we have the ability to, we're not the sole, but we could say to cause. Kinda like we did with the
Or
posting
to
of.
refer for investigation, or, anything. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, I understand where Doug's coming from. I think you all, as the person who needs to have some moral authority to do their job, I think you understand where I'm coming
Yep.
from.
Right. And we
I just
over
don't
here-
know how to word.
Right, and we just over here said we're gonna refrain from meddling in the day-to-day operations, and here this is giving us
I
the
think,
ability to
I
do
think there's
that.
a significant difference between fraudulent activity and day-to-day operations, investigations of people in fraud. This is public government, and we all know that public government, public offices, there's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of unethical things that take place, and I think as the body that we would need to investigate that. So I'm gonna say that as somebody who's done audit and a lot of that, they're not day-to-day operations. These are one-off, very scary things that people get away with for a very long time. And it's our job to investigate that and to be regulatory oversight. I wouldn't even put that in the scope of day-to-day operations.
So let me just take a stab at this for a moment.
Mhm.
To refer to the town administrator and/or town council, comma, for investigation, comma, of the affairs of the town, yada, 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 or to make such investigations whenever such matters shall involve the town administrator and/or town council. Something along
Something along those
that line. I don't know exactly how to do it on the fly here,
Well, it
but
sounds,
I think you
basically
captured
you're
the
saying,
essence.
if there's something that you become aware of, you refer it off to the administrator and town council. And if it's about them, of course, you have to do it yourself.
right.
Mhm.
Okay, that
that-
makes sense.
Make sense?
Yep. Did you have anything else, Doug?
No, that's all I'd had so far.
No, I mean, obviously, did you get we all got the copy, right?
Now, there
Copy
was the
of
one
this.
piece, though, Cameron.
The finalized?
You were gonna mention?
Oh, yes, yes, so,
Oops, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yes, yes.
Please tell
yep,
Doug.
So Doug, I actually have another drafted amendment that I totally slipped my mind on this one. So, you wanted to do the preparation of handling a town meeting, so like how we're gonna build up to town meeting, what we need to do, how we're gonna organize that. There was a draft clause, I don't have it with me, and it was after the fact of when we submitted it. So I will do that, it will be in the next packet of that draft addendum. But we did incorporate your clause in there. We were all in agreement of how we should prepare for
Yep.
town meeting, what we should be doing, making it much more formalized. So we'll include a town meeting section, and we'll do that. I'm going to insert it. I think it's one's right before the other meetings. Oh, it is 1002. No? 1003. Oh, 1004. I'm gonna insert that on 1004, as its own annual town meeting and special town meeting, our roles, what we're doing in them and how we're preparing for it, so.
Okay.
I'll do that, and I'll give that as a separate draft clause, and then I'll also insert it as well, so you guys can see what it is, what it looks like individually.
Excellent.
And you've read this before, right, Doug? This is,
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah, this is, I think this is the second time, or third time it's come back.
right.
First time was just kind of an introduction, the second time we had kind of discussed it a little bit, and the third time, this time, me and Carter had sat down and
Okay.
done it, so.
All right, no, it looks great. Good job.
Losing sleep over it.
Any other discussion concerning the policy, the procedures, Board of Selectmen? And, so, by Wednesday at noon?
That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Review FY19 budget, preliminary directions to the TA.
So what I want to do is share with you kind of where we're at. So I'll draw your attention first to the local aid estimates. Unrestricted general government aid is up about 50,000. It goes from $1,393,000 to $1,441,000. That's good news, and that's where the good news ends. State-owned land is down $30,000. Now, as you may know, we have Senator Goby, Representative Whips Lee, coming in on the 12th. We reached out to different departments. You may not be able to ask them every question, but this is an opportunity for them to do a little
Chest pounding.
breastfeeding and, but also a chance for you to have a few questions for them. I don't think you wanna have a whole bunch, but, if I could get those questions over the next week, I can narrow the list down and let you know, so you can settle upon those. Maybe you wanna ask what happened here.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because why would land values decrease when the market is increasing?
I don't know if
when
they
they
tried to
haven't
change the
sold them?
formula. There was a year when Governor Romney basically stood the thing on its head. And he said, we're gonna change this such that we're putting the emphasis upon buildings because buildings demand services. So for the towns that have institutions, whether it's an office building or a prison or something else, we're gonna try to move more money to them. Land doesn't take a lot of service. So I don't know what's driving this, but that's $30,000, and that's a lot of money to us. Now, on the back side of this, our contribution to the regional transit has dropped around $15,000. So that's where the net comes in. So we're up about 17, down around 15. So we're basically about 32,000 to the good overall.
You get 10 extra dollars to the libraries?
Yeah, how are the formulas?
How do they come up with
And that's
these?
not general aid, that is reserved aid that
Right.
goes to them
Yep.
directly. So I just wanted to give you a sense of, this has not changed our picture dramatically. If I can turn your attention to the one I gave you on the schools. Good news is, they're up about $270,000. Now, the interesting part of that is $100,000 of that is actually in the school choice sending. So you had about 16 kids less go out. Now, remember, these are a year old.
Right.
They basically track a year. But the fewer kids that go out, you can see what 16 kids could do for your bottom line. There's 100, so that's good news.
So he won't be asking for a lot of money then?
Well, I tried that line of reasoning. I congratulated him upon all the extra money he got. I'm not sure he had the same sense of humor about it as we
Probably
all at
not,
this table
probably
might
not.
have. One of the things you may want to talk with the delegation about, and I would just refresh your memory, this comes out of the state auditor, Suzanne Bump's, report done about, I don't know, 5 months or so ago, we sent out to you, that the state has never fully funded regional school transportation. And so, it's costing around $500,000 roughly for regular education. We're getting reimbursed about $355, so there's about $150 roughly on the table there. And, you know, that's real money to us.
Right.
An extra $150,000 on the table is, we pay 85% of that, any extra dollars there. That's roughly 85%. So I just wanted to share those numbers with you. We had a very positive meeting, I thought, with the Insurance Advisory Committee last week. The chairman, I don't know if he wants to comment on that or not. But the maximum rate increase for anybody in Maya will be 11%. The average is gonna be about 4.6. They think we're more closer to the average. And we've looked at some benefit platform changes. For instance, just changing the benefit platform on the PPO, the indemnity plan, so that it's costs us basically the same as the HMOs. Will save $11,000 and only impact 2 employees. And we have some other things that the committee, and what did you have, a couple, 3, 4 things that the committee sent them back to take a look at?
Yeah,
Different
looking at the plus
formulas.
line.
So I'm hopeful that we can keep this in the 3.5% range, especially if we deploy 1 or 2 of these benefit platform changes.
Okay.
Do they have to provide a PPO and
By
a
statute.
HMO?
By law. Yeah, I'm afraid so. But you don't have to provide as rich a PPO as you're providing
Mhm. But we do have to provide both.
by statute.
Yeah.
Yep, afraid so, Doug. But even the platform change that we're talking about is not horrific, and if we use an HSA for it, there's some opportunities there. But when I look at $11,000 for 2 people, so if we get, let's say 4.2% is an increase, okay? If you make that platform change for those 2 people, that drops it to a 3% increase across the board for everybody else.
Yeah, that's a good deal.
I just can't justify not exploring that.
Seems
Yeah,
like
we
a good
also
deal.
explored that with, obviously, the light and water would be on board with that as well.
John has been part of both meetings, I think.
Okay.
We did get pricing for a more dramatic change to the HMO. And the light and water are aware that if we triggered that, there would be no more 2-tiered HMOs.
It would just be one across the board.
Have to be just one
Okay.
across the board. My goal here is to minimize the disruption to the employees. Recognize insurance goes up, like everything else, goes up every year. To try to minimize the disruption to the employees, but keep it at a price point that lets me balance the budget out. They like the provider. They all speak very highly of the provider. And I haven't heard anybody complain about the change last year. What we went from $50 on the emergency room to $100.
No, I don't think people use it a lot.
And it saved us, what'd that shave, about 1%?
I think so.
Yeah, it saved like 1.25% off the increase.
Mhm.
So we're looking at some small things, maybe the imaging, MRIs, CAT scans, which have a 0 copay right now, different things. And
Yeah.
I don't have either of the schools.
Now, their insurance platform is different.
Very different.
Okay.
Yeah, they're part of the Neshoba Valley Cooperative.
Okay,
Um,
which is a larger cooperative.
much larger. That would take much more dramatic changes.
I get understood.
So right now, we're starting to go through it. We have about $1.25 million, as best we can tell right this minute, more requests than we have dollars. But we haven't finished moving all the capital out of the operating budgets over the capital budget. And we haven't calculated the reimbursements from light, sewer, and water. So I'm not panicked just yet. The big thing, though, was that I have had some of the board members say, do this, do this, do that. And if there are specific things that board members want me to do and want to bring them up, and I see a collective group of nodding heads, I'll do them. But they were not on my hit parade. So this is an
Your
opportunity.
hit parade.
Well,
Well, I will be honest with you, there's a couple of things that I have on my radar. The code red, right now, you're spending about $5,500 a year, and you have what are called 1,200 message service units. And the way they measure that is if your message is 1 minute long, and they broadcast that out to, let's say you have 1,700 subscribers. That is 1,700 message service units. So you get to have 4 or 5 messages a year. That's it. Which, for the price you're paying, to me, doesn't seem to be a good buy. There's some other products out there. Some are unlimited. We're gonna try and get them in here fast over the next week or two, but it's probably gonna double what the price is. But I also have a tool that's much, if there's a public hearing, I can send the message out. When the town election is coming, I can send the message out. When the town meeting's coming up, I can send the message out. When there's a snowstorm, like when we
right.
message everybody. When Alan's gonna do a road reconstruction and he's gonna have roads closed.
When lights are gonna be down for a power outage because of
If
repairs.
there's gonna be power outages, if there's gonna be water shut-offs, we can invite Light and Water to use it.
That's what you're laughing at.
Oh, jeez.
Just 5 messages, roughly, please don't hold me to that exact number, over the course of the year is, I don't even know why I even bother, frankly, to spend $6,000.
Right.
Just be able to send out 5 or 6 messages. So that's on my parade. The other one is I really am planning to push the community services director as full-time. I'm not necessarily planning to go back to the same well to try to find the water to pay for it. We'll gore somebody else's ox this year to try to do that.
Nice, nicely said.
I've never been accused of being all that flowery.
No, I just, honesty is the best policy here.
And we know that we've got to do something with the tech budget. I owe Doug, and Holly and I have promised each other that we would sit down tomorrow and do that spreadsheet. We know that that's not gonna be inexpensive to get the email and get the Office 365 deployed to everybody. And the fire department, I have to tell you, is roughly 2.25
Sure.
short.
Yep.
And that doesn't include apparatus.
Right, that's just the personnel piece.
That's just the personnel, that gear, they have to have the fuel.
2.25.
And that doesn't include the fact that next year's ambulance will be roughly $15,000 more than the lease for this year's.
And this year's up this year, so this lease is up this year, correct?
Yeah, you're paying about 39,000. And so next year, when you have to go to get that new ambulance, it's gonna be in the 275 plus or minus range.
Mhm.
So there's 55,000 on the principal alone.
Right,
And then we'll have another 6,000, give or take. So we'll be at 61,000 roughly instead of 40,000. And that's gonna be a big challenge we need you to be aware of.
that's a $20,000 increase.
Yes, that's a huge nut.
Yep.
The chief is aware of a few minor things we can do with Medicare, Medicaid billing, but it's real money, it's 10,000-15,000, but it's very short money by comparison to the need.
Yeah, now, did he also look at the average rates around to see if we're compatible? I mean, I know we did an increase in rates based on service being provided by transport. Is that something that we might need to look at again based on maybe another analysis of the area, what we're
You can always
charging?
go up a few more, right? It's not like you
Well,
can-
we can do that, but at this
You
point,
can't look at
Medicare
it.
and Medicaid pay.
I
Doesn't
understand.
matter what-
Right. You can bill $1,000 with paying 200, no, I got that. My concern is the HMO PPOs that are paying their major majority. But again, a large consumer here is the Medicare and Medicaid usage.
Yeah, I can ask the chief to do a quick recheck, but I think we're probably
In the ballpark.
in the ballpark,
Okay.
because most everybody had done their stuff last year.
Well, that's a huge, that's huge.
I see the ambulance as being the major nut, even if we can take care of everything else.
Right.
I think you're probably gonna be, forget capital, operations alone, you're gonna be 250 plus or minus short. And I haven't heard from the schools. Haven't heard anything from the schools.
Are they adequately staffed for what the requirements are, the ALS
Right now.
requirements? Right now?
The chief needs to hire 2 more full-time career firefighter EMTs. He and
And-
firefighter paramedics, yes.
And is that included in that 225?
Yes.
Okay.
So what the chief and I have agreed, no matter what happens, is we will not be hiring the 2 career firefighter paramedics in April 1. Because to hire them on April 1, before we know we have solid money to keep them in place, is just not a good idea.
I would agree.
So the chief's in agreement on that.
In April, when we go to, how many hours per day we're supposed to
You are
provide by
supposed to be
OEMS?
full-time, 24 hours by then.
Okay, that could potentially put us in jeopardy.
It's a challenge.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a real challenge.
I mean, 'cause if we get audited by this Commonwealth, and they realize,
He'll continue to cover with the per diems, but
I
it's a
understand.
real challenge. I mean, basically, unfortunately, the town pulled the trigger a year early.
Mhm.
Forget about the financial, but in terms of deploying this, they pulled the trigger really a year too early.
understood. Okay. And as far as other avenues of dollars, as far as looking at, obviously the retirees and looking at potentially the dental, dental plan.
That could save us around 14,000, 13,750,
Right.
something like that.
I mean, every rock has to be
It-
unturned
It does,
at this point.
I'm-
Still
I'm-
pushing the meals tax to see how the public's accepting that, see if they are accepting that, see how the
I've heard nothing but good
proprietors-
things about the meal tax. It's just
and
a.
he changed the pictorial.
Oh, good.
Oh, you did,
Yeah, I
nice,
did.
nice.
Yeah, that truck was really bad.
That
Now
was-
it's new for everyone.
It's new for everyone.
That's great. That's great.
He only had 2 people come to the hearing the other night. I think it lasted,
20 minutes.
And there was no issues, I mean, what were there?
It was Charlie Carroll and
And his mom.
yeah, and his mom.
Oh, nice.
So-
I think it was general philosophy of you can't keep asking for money, you need to figure out how to do this. And we'd had kind of a preview in the office earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Third meeting was Monday night.
Yep, Monday night, the 5th.
Okay.
And then from our side, we're gonna wrap this up, and I suspect we will make it part of our formal proposal to you. On the capital side, and I haven't seen anything to change the direction on it.
Okay. I mean, we all put our priorities forward as far as the town's public safety concerning fire, police, and ALS service with the fire department and the highway department. You know, there's gonna be some tough challenges ahead, especially looking at these numbers, looking at fire numbers.
We are having some challenges, just so you'll know, with the MART reimbursement, because they gave us a sense of direction last year. We laid off the dispatcher because they were gonna do 1/3 of the cost of the drivers to cover admin.
Mhm.
Now they're back to, well, we think dispatchers are cheaper. Which would be of no help to us, because we'd have to hire a dispatcher and lose that,
Admin
some
person.
portion of that 33, which is helping to cover general admin
Right,
from our people who are there doing it.
right.
So the MART is challenging. Meals on Wheels continues, in my opinion, to be challenging from a cost per unit served.
Right.
And I'm afraid I do get my bean counter hat on every once in a while and look at it through that lens. No great proposals for savings and no great proposals for revenue on the near horizon.
Right, okay.
So, I mean, I'll just say it again, I do think that there's, that the community would consider, you know, small overrides to cover uncontrollable fixed costs. I do think they would consider, for ALS, you know, the ambulance service. So, you know, we shouldn't just completely discount that.
I'm not. I am nervous, however,
Mhm.
of potentially having 3 questions in 1 year.
Yeah.
Meals tax, whether it's ALS or it's, you know, a short one for, let's say, the scholarship fund and Meals on Wheels, just to free some dollars up somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do get nervous about the idea of 3 items all in 1 year.
Mhm.
Especially dollar items. I mean, when you look at the history of this town anyways, from what I can see, I'm not from here. I mean, I've been here since '05, and I can tell you since then, I mean, there's been, I mean,
Right, but again, I think, you know, what's different now from what's happened between '05 and now, is, I think the public is seeing improvement. I think they're, you know, optimistic that we're, you know, moving in the right direction.
The unfortunate
They
part
understand the value
is,
of the ambulance service, so I think there would be support for that.
well, it's not just that, it's what's gonna happen, like, down the road, too, because, I mean, the people understand that, yeah, you could potentially, we can talk override for a small number, you know, 250,000, 300,000, whatever that's gonna take to, say, just outfit the ambulance. But they also know come next year, the school's gonna be tacked on. So when they start looking at tax, assessed values, they look at taxes itself, at $16.72 that we're at right now currently, knowing the fact that everybody that touches us is at least at $20 a thousand. But the house prices are going up, so when the house prices go up, tax rate goes down, but it still seems like they're paying more taxes than they did last year. And that's because their values went up.
Yep.
But then you add, you know, say an override, which is gonna cost, say 25 cents more per thousand, just for throwing numbers out there. Then you add the school on top of that the same year. Then you add something else on top of that the same year.
Yeah.
Then when the DOR catches that sheet at the end of the year and says, oh, well, we need to capture this because we didn't do that, so we need to do this. And next thing you know, you're from $16.72 to $19 a thousand, and people are gonna be like, oh my lord, what just happened? I mean, you wanna at least gradually, you know, you wanna, you know, rub the shoulders a little bit first before you rub the head, you know what I
I
mean?
agree.
Because
Had
otherwise,
we been doing this from
By mistake,
2013,
didn't it?
when I
Yeah,
first started saying it,
yeah, the unfortunate part,
exactly. I wasn't gonna go there that way, but.
Oh, God.
if you'd had the discussion about the ALS and what it was going to cost and put the override on the ballot back in the day, I think you are right. I think it would have been approved.
Mhm.
The challenge is, we're now 2 years into this, and
Right.
people are gonna say, what happened? You know, how did this happen? And I don't think that, the community really understood the proposal that the former chief put out there, and the challenge of making that business model work.
And again, this is not the blame game.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I mean, again, I know the people of Templeton, they wanna know, well, who's responsible, who's at fault, and, yeah, I'm gonna grab my pitchfork. You know, we're past that stage. Right now, we're in the fix stage, and we need to identify collectively together to determine where the need is with the fire department, and based on what the people voted for. And how are we gonna continue that based on the necessity and the needs that the town has right now? You know, we've all said it, you know, there's only a couple things you can do in a community like this. Either you raise your revenues, or you decrease services. That's the only thing that you can do. That's the only thing. I mean, then you go over here and you'll look at an override. But then you look at, a $47 million new school being built, or a new pump station that's being built down in Baldwinville. I mean, those things are still in people's backs of their minds. So when you look at all, like Carter said, I mean, I would be hard pressed to put 2 or 3 financial obligation things on a ballot. Because again, I can just see the people, it's just gonna be no. And then when people vote no, it's no. And then what's gonna happen? Then you have to go back to the operating budget. Carter's gonna be losing more of his hair, because where's it gonna come from?
I still think
But
personally,
just to say we're gonna blindly cut because we don't wanna pay for services.
No, I bet, but again, we, as a board of selectmen, as the elected officials in this community, we have our priorities. We know public safety is our priority. Ambulance, fire, and highway department, public safety. Everything else is, it's based on our priority list is ancillary. So what happens? So we have to take from all these other groups to focus on the group that needs the cash. And what happens to these groups?
So
There's
don't hold me to this exact number, but the school, when it is built and fully bonded, we've got about $1 to bring onto the tax rate. Okay, because that's gonna be roughly 1.5 million on a 30-year note. But 400 of it is already baked into the rate because the middle school, I think it was, drops off.
Right.
And
Middle school, high school.
there's about 500,000 of that's already baked into the rate when we did the clawback
Right.
on all the debt exclusions that hadn't been put on the recaps. So we've got 560,000 bucks, roughly, let's call it $1, that has to come onto the rate still.
Yep.
The potential of a $311,000 override, because I have this affinity for this poor Eric's, how did you decide to change that number? 50 cents on the rate is $311,000. So that brings you to $18.22, everything else being equal.
I still think in Templeton currently that we offer a plethora of services such as comparable to like Westminster or Ashburnham, who have a significantly higher tax rate, a wealthier base population. And currently in Templeton, I think we've made the decision, people made the decision prior that they wanted low tax rates. And unfortunately, in a community, you can't have low tax rates and have all the services you want. So currently, I think that when I look at Templeton, I mean, we offer all these services, and if we make those cuts to some of these services that are, I would say, extremities to one point rather than the core, which is the public safety, the fire, or the public safety and all, we'll say fire, police, and then DPW, as well as the school. Those are your bread and butter. If you don't have those, you don't have a community. Everything else, to me, is much more of an extremity, nice to have, so to say. If you're fully funded, you can keep those programs open. But I think in Templeton, we are not fully funded, and I think we need to make some seriously tough choices to make sure we can get our core, our bread and butter, which is the DPW, the fire, and the police, back to parity of these other communities. And if that takes a tough choice of having to shut down something or having to make some extreme cuts, that's what we need to do. And it's not to say they'll go away forever. It's to say that we need to get back to a parity, something that we have in these other communities like Winchendon, that, like in Gardner, Ashburnham, Athol. If we gotta get to parity with the rest of these guys because we're offering such low rates and pay scale for the DPW, fire, and police, or if, you know, we don't have the capital rolling stock, we need to make those tough choices. And I can't sit here in all good consciousness and listen to penny pinching. How are we gonna take this fund here and move it over here and here? At the end of the day, if we don't have the funds for that bread and butter, I'm embarrassed to be in this community, because that's what we need, a fully funded police, fire, and DPW. And that's my standpoint on it, and
So, we don't have all the numbers in yet, but I think the best scenario is that you are short, something on the order of 50 cents, 300, 275, 290, which at that point, it's 311.
Right, I got you.
And you, if that's the way it stays, and I always get a little nervous about talking too publicly because somebody grabs a nugget of something and they're off to the
Yeah.
races.
Exactly,
But you really have two choices. You either zero right in on what has generated this issue, and it's the ALS. Or you say, well, that's fine, but we want it no matter what, come hell or high water. So go find other stuff, and cut all that and put that into,
Right.
a potential, for discussion of consideration of a potential
Right.
override. Those are really the two directions.
Right. I mean, those are the only directions you can go.
It's all we got,
That's it.
because we've done all we can on the revenue side.
And if we wanna go for the override, I think we put that $350,000 that we currently have on the budget, find it wherever it may be in crucial, in extremity services, I call them, her luxury services, and cut it and see, you know, you bring that to town meeting and say, we either cut it or there's an override. You know, if we don't get the override, this is what's gonna be cut, and that way you can defer it to the townspeople to say, we want fully funded.
But most likely it'll be cut prior to that anyways,
You cut it right out of the budget.
right
you
on the
don't-
budget. It's done.
If-
But again,
you
if you go to town meeting and say, we're looking for this override, or these are the services that are gonna get cut, now people can make an informed decision.
But by the time
If you
that-
give them a budget that says, okay, we're gonna approve this budget for X, and there's no meat behind what X means,
Yeah.
you're not giving them the full story.
Now, if you've decided, let's just use this as a number, that you need 8.4 million, but you only have, let me say 8.3 million, but you only have 8 million.
Right.
You give them a budget for 8 million. And then there's a second warrant article to see, subject to the successful passage of a Proposition 2.5 override, which unfortunately, remember,
Right.
has already happened
Right, because the vote already happened May 1st.
10 days before.
Right.
Mhm.
Can we have that, we can't have that on the ballot before the people. It would go to the people first, right?
I think it's tough to say, we need an override because we don't have enough money, so let's call a special election.
Yeah, and there's not a need to do that. I mean, at the annual town meeting,
And
we
you
say,
can't wait for the fall, because you can't use the November ballot unless you call a special town meeting.
Right.
And then you're already partway into the year, and if you got and if you're relying upon an override, what are you gonna do about all those people and those services?
They would have to be shut down until that special town meeting.
That's the do or die, and, you know,
but again, there's no reason we can't do it at the annual town meeting. I mean, if we determine
But the
311 is the number.
The electoral vote already, the ballot vote already happened. So the ballot vote, but again, you can't put
Right,
it on
which
the
is why
ballot.
it's the problem. It needs
Right.
to be reversed.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but
But we're not
again,
gonna get that fixed this year.
it's not gonna get fixed this year. So my point, the problem is it's gonna go to the people first, which is 2 weeks after the ballot vote. So if the people say yes for the override, which is great,
Mhm.
and then they have to wait an entire, 8 months until the special, well, what happens to those services? They have to be stopped.
Mhm.
There are no services until
yeah,
that.
I think that's if that's what it comes down to, and the citizens of Templeton, the voters don't want these services that we said we were gonna axe or whatever, and I don't wanna use the term axe, it sounds bloody, but that we decided to cut, then that's it. You gotta feel, it's either you feel the pressure because, oh no, we should have voted one way and now, these services are closed, or that's what they wanted and they're perfectly content with that. So which-
again, but we have to communicate that we're gonna ask for this override because ALS has created this problem, or whatever we wanna say. And we can pass an override so that we can continue on. Or if you don't pass the override, these are the things you're gonna do without.
Well,
Well, it's part of public outreach. I
Well,
mean,
it is, and let me just do
We
one
can put that
correction.
on the ballot.
One correction, it's not what we wanna say, it's the fact of the matter is that AOS is what's, driving this train. We cannot afford to have 24-hour AOS service with 2 people. We need at least 6 people, but we're gonna try to manage it with 4, which is 2 more need to be hired. And with benefits and salary and equipment, you're probably looking at just over $100-some thousand per individual, and then that's the first year. Then the second year, obviously, you're dealing with the salary and just the benefits at that point, which is still about $90,000 apiece. So when you look at all these numbers, so when you look at an override and we talk to the people, it's not because of what we wanna say, it's the fact is, the AOS that the people voted on, which what they wanted, is someone put the cart before the horse, but that's okay, and this is how we need to fix it. And the only way we can fix it is that we need to shut all these other services down, to take all those dollars and put it to the AOS to make it run effectively and efficiently, or we need to do an override, to get all these other ancillary services back up and running.
Exactly.
That's the fact.
$350,000
But again-
that we can free up to get onto this?
This would involve scoring multiple oxes. Yeah, I can get to the number.
So we need
Yeah,
the
let's
assessors,
see
we'll
if
need
we
the
can
Board of
fully
Health,
fund it with the
we'll need the building
350,000,
inspector.
gut it, and let's see what it looks like.
If you're gonna get 300,000, you're gonna close a lot of departments.
The challenge,
Just to see what it looks like. I'm not saying we're going to. I need to see what when you say a lot of departments, I don't know what that is. Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 12? I don't know.
either.
That's why I wanna see it.
And those departments that you just
Let's
named off are
look at it.
departments that
Generate
bring in
revenue.
dollars.
Exactly.
Uh,
So they're
we-
not insinuary.
and I don't wanna lose sight of a couple of things we need to keep front and center, as these discussions happen with the community. And bear in mind, you will have, only until about April 3rd to make this decision.
That
That's
hurts.
the drop dead.
Yep.
To get it to the town clerk to be on the ballot. First, without ALS, a formal ALS here, we still have to send first responders,
Right, which is still costing dollars.
which is still costing dollars, and becomes increasingly difficult if your fire/EMS department becomes demoralized over the loss of this service.
Right.
That's the first thing. And second, I don't wanna lose sight of the fact that 2/3 of your department activity is now all EMS. About 330 fire calls. And one of the major reasons, in my opinion, the only reason a town would wanna go to career firefighter paramedics for EMS is to have people in the fire station to roll those trucks when you can't get your call people there. Because you have fewer and fewer people who are really just your firefighters who can get away from their job. They
Right.
work farther and farther. For many of our people in town, Doug's commute is actually a short one.
Yeah, half an hour.
He's got a half an hour. Cameron's an hour.
I was in Waltham.
It's even, hour 15.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our folks commute.
Mhm.
They aren't working here, they aren't
Right.
in the factories here anymore. And for those who are still working in the area, a lot of employers no longer will release their firefighters from their jobs, 40 years ago, if you were on a factory line, it was not a big deal.
Mhm.
Today, if you're working at FlexCon, let's say, because I'm familiar with it, they're not gonna let you leave the line because the line is a $500,000
Right, right.
computerized piece of equipment
Right.
that still has to have somebody there. to keep it programmed and to keep it working.
Yep.
So that's a real challenge. We'll have to decide soon, sense of direction. So, unfortunately, you know, we've only got the three of you here tonight. But the business meeting of the 12th really is kind of my deadline if you want to give me a definite sense of direction in one way or another. I'm not shy about proposing my own solutions if need be.
I've heard that.
But if you do want to give me a definite sense of direction, I'll really need that by the 12th, whether
Okay.
it's individually or collectively.
Carter, if you can, for my benefit, do you think you could show me what a budget looks like with the $350,000 freed up? It doesn't, I don't need, you know, oh, well, we're gonna take 1,000. If you wanna show me that we can trim, right, without,
No, it's
It-
complete closure.
There's no trimming.
well, that's what I'm saying,
It's-
that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
When I say trim, I mean that you're literally just saying out of the picture, right? So axing or cutting or whatever you need to do, and just show me what we have left.
I'd be happy to chat with you
Yep.
about that. I'm a little reluctant to
At this
get
point.
ahead of myself at this point.
I just,
I know what
I
you're
wanna
looking
see
for.
those numbers, and
It's,
I know that sounds like a
it's pretty drastic. 300,000 to 9311. That's a lot of money. And let's not
course.
forget that you have to actually go above that because you're gonna have an unemployment cost
That's right.
that comes. And you have
What is our-
mothballing costs.
what is our unemployment rate now? Fairly low, right?
We had a pretty good drop last year.
At the end, we did.
But that took you 3 years to get that, because your 14 layoffs,
Doesn't it cap at 0.6 or 6, or what is it?
I'd have to go
Yeah,
look.
it caps at some point, so. don't know.
But your rate from the 14 layoffs went up and stayed up for 3 years. It was pretty
That was
drastic.
dramatic.
Yeah, we laid off for a whole quarter.
Yep.
Every non-essential personnel.
Okay.
All right. Excellent. So working on that. What do we got next?
So on the update of the Templeton Center Elementary School, I'd really kind of hold that. You've got is Phillipston coming here?
Yes,
On the 6th?
on the 6th, February.
We're gonna give them a little bit of an agenda. It's basically what we had in the letter. Just talking about, we already do the joint dispatch. Are there other opportunities for regionalization? We wanted to talk with them about both town clerks. We've asked to have present. Wanted to talk with them about the elections, which then is within the regional school district agreement. From my perspective, would like to talk with them about amending the regional school district agreement to require budgets earlier. Now, Dr. Cassavant's really putting a lot of effort into that this year, and I think it's gonna be much better, but if he weren't there, if the relationship wasn't improving or building, I should say, you know, to be able to have a draft school budget by 15 February with a final school budget that didn't go up
Right.
by March 15, then the town would be much better able to do a real budget.
Right.
Last year, we didn't get the final budget until we were trying to wrap ours up and,
Yeah, there was some other changes in that agreement too, with the maintenance thing of the 5,000 versus and it's not at today's marketable rates as far as
Exactly.
services, repairs. You know, I like this, you know, potentially see that between about 25,000
Yeah,
would be a nice number.
right.
5,000 is way below, I mean, that's an electrician and 2
So
days'
I
work.
think the conversation about you know, when you get the new school built, and
Mhm.
how's that gonna be leased to them, I think that can be wrapped into this whole joint meeting in
Yep.
terms of what their interests might be. 'Cause 25,000 is probably a reasonable level.
I mean, based on the work rates of today,
That'll buy you 3 or 4 window air
Yeah, yeah.
conditioning units.
it's about the size of it. Yeah. So I did see that agreement, I did read some of it, and I made some notes for myself. What I'll do is I'll get that out to Holly, so I can get it out to the rest of the select board members, so they can, I'm sure, have you seen the agreement? The municipal agreement between
No,
Phillips and
I
us?
mean, I've looked at it a long time ago.
It's been a while
3 years
since
ago. I haven't
we did
looked at it.
distribute it, and we'll try to get that back out.
Okay, because again, I mean, they did talk about the election in the month of May, but there's no day. So there are some things that we can hopefully work with Phillipson and hopefully come up to an agreement, based on the school committee is what's driving this, because the school committee members, because it's regionalized.
Mhm.
Templeton votes for Phillipson folks, and Phillipson folks vote for Templeton folks. So it's kind of unique in a way, being a regional system, so.
But still, I mean, I think there's no legal requirement
No,
that
there
we
isn't.
have to vote on the same day.
I don't see any, but I mean, unless there's, the statute says otherwise, but I.
Well, you
I
can't
see
keep
it.
the challenge that folks would raise is, concerned folks would raise is you can't keep the ballot sealed.
Right,
So the vote would be known on this side of the border when the folks over there went to vote.
Right, that's a good point, yeah.
And I know we all grouse, or at least folks in the West Coast grouse when, the votes are coming in and the networks are making predictions on this side and their voting is still open. So, I mean, you might have some objections.
and I think
From
Phillips, I
Phillipson.
think they, I think we'll see that their election and their new select board members that come in,
Mhm.
they're in the same situation we are.
Right.
Kinda like when you came your first meeting was a meeting, but then your next big thing was the town meeting, and you're trying to rationalize a budget that you had nothing to do with.
Yep.
That you've never seen before. And how did we get to this number?
Right.
And we're going into a deficit, what do you mean? And you had all these questions, and I think, the people that organize and orchestrate the budget, should be there representing the people, because they're the ones that put it on paper. And then not having one or two new elected, officials that are standing up on a stage that have no idea what happened. And I think Phillips is in the same boat, I think their elections are similar to ours.
Yep.
So they have their election.
You only have a one-year term for town moderator. Conceivably, you could have a new moderator every year.
Right.
And within a week, that new person has to manage the town meeting.
That's right. And the same thing happens with the
Town clerk we
town
fixed.
clerk.
Yeah.
We fixed that one because we
But that was
moved their
huge.
term to end on June 30.
But that was huge, because can you imagine, she would have been in the same boat.
Exactly.
And then, you have a new town clerk, next thing you know, her first major event is a town meeting,
Yeah.
and making sure that, it's in the newspaper, making sure the signs are out, making sure the public is notified. That's,
Yeah, it's just
that's a lot of
crazy.
work.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
It is,
Yeah.
it is. Not to mention the fact of the financial aspects of challenges that we face every single day, to put things on the ballot. Well, in order to get things on the ballot, you need to have a town meeting first for the townspeople to approve it before it goes to the ballot, which makes sense. And even, I mean, obviously, it's gonna be on the ballot anyways, because it has to be there, 6 weeks? The ballot has to be done 6 weeks before. So, it really, if the people say no, they're still gonna see it potentially on the ballot, but they're gonna say no on the ballot anyway, you know what I mean? So, it's not on the ballot, right? Because the ballot record is done, 6 weeks before?
She has to have the ballot off to the printers about 6 weeks.
Yeah, so that, I mean, even though the people say no at the town meeting, they will also see it again on the ballot, which they'll probably say no again, but it's not because we're doing this to win something over on you, it's just that how's the process
As a
works.
general rule, my experience has been that town meeting generally supports these issues.
Right,
In part because they're there and they've heard the debate,
Mhm.
and they've had a chance to ask the department head all their questions.
Mhm.
But the ballot box is a very different story.
Roger,
Mhm.
okay.
So wasn't that cheery?
It was very cheery, thank you so much, not really. Any general discussion, any other items that you wanna talk about?
Yeah, I'm gonna start drafting, once this Board of Selectmen policy's in for Wednesday, I'm gonna start working on the procurement.
Okay.
I'm gonna just get that out, cause Diane has been absent for 3-4 months, and I think that's an issue we need to resolve, so I'm gonna just get drafting on the procurement. I know that was in her scope, but
Okay, understood. Just work with Carter, and understand that Carter is the chief procurement officer based on his job description, and obviously based on the dynamics of the community and the town and how small we are. Just work hand in hand with him. I think you have a pretty good handle of it.
Yeah, we can do that.
And obviously, all the 30B, 40B stuff is still going through the Board of Selectmen office through you?
We're trying.
No, that's not the answer I was expecting to hear, but, I mean,
Well, we still have some departments that despite having gone to training, don't understand the statute. We did have a webinar with Vadar planned for the purchase order module as one way to help bring this under control.
understood.
And unfortunately, that had to be rescheduled. Kelly had to be out of town that day.
Okay, but that's being worked?
Yeah,
Okay.
one other thing I wanted to point out too is relationship I have with one of the selectmen in Winchendon.
Mm-hmm.
He had offered me their HR policies because they had the Collins Institute come in there and draft a lot of their
Oh, nice.
HR policies.
Mhm.
So he said that if you guys want to use them as boilerplate for HR policies and personnel policies, he says he has a total plethora of them that he'd be willing to hand over to us so that we can utilize those as well. So if you want, I can explore that and see what I can come out of that with. Because I think HR is something that personnel or whatever, we're lacking in that department. So it might be helpful to have something that will, guide us just a little bit. So, okay.
Okay. Doug, you got any?
I don't know.
Nothing? All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second, thank you very much. Doug? Kim?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you for coming.